These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, how the death of privacy and the rise of surveillance threaten us and our democracy, by Thom Hartmann. More information at all book outlets. Wild Alaskan Company, 100% sustainable wild-caught seafood delivered right to your door. More info at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. Cozy Earth, better sleep, better you. More info at cozyearth.com, promo code TOM. The latest views and opinions from U.S. politics and other fascinating subjects too, including cutting-edge science reports at hartmanreport.com. And Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at dinovite.com.
Today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Tyranny, From Plato to Trump, Fools, Sycophants, and Citizens by Andrew Fiala. This is from the preface. It starts out with a quote from Mary Wollstonecraft from her book, A Vindication of the Rights of Women. Quote, "Tyrants would have cause to tremble if reason were to become the rule of duty." We recently witnessed the failure of a would-be tyrant who attempted to subvert the rule of law and overturn the result of a democratic election. The American system was pushed toward a cliff, but constitutional guardrails slowed things down. Conscientious people pumped the brakes, and the system held. This was a lesson of tyranny averted. We should take stock and learn what worked and what needs improvement in our system and in our souls. And while the American crisis of 2020-2021 was frightening, a broader historical perspective helps. The threat of tyranny is common, but the cure is well known. It involves virtuous citizenship and a stable constitution. The tyrant's rise and fall is an old story. Consider, a plague descended on the nation as the tyrant ranted and raved, refusing to admit that he was the cause of the nation's ills. The tyrant lived in a fantasy world of his own creation. He refused to accept what was said by those who spoke truth to power. Instead, he listened only to those who flattered his ego and encouraged him in his delusions. The nation suffered profoundly under the tyrant and his plague. He tried to blame the plague on some other scapegoat. Members of the public were seduced by the tyrant and his sycophants to sacrifice everything on behalf of a lie. Violence erupted. When the awful truth was finally revealed, the chorus reached a tragic conclusion. Our lives were mere shadow, and then there's a block of poetry here. Our lives were mere shadows. Happiness fades away to nothing. The tyrant's fall reminds us that no human creation lasts forever. Plague and trouble make victims of us all. This is from Oedipus, the Tyrant, lines 1190. This is the story of Oedipus. It is also the story of Donald Trump. The players in this tragedy are found throughout history. They are the tyrant, his sycophants, and the moronic masses. The tyrant rages, the sycophants simper, the masses cheer and howl, fight and die. As the plague spreads, good things fall apart and decency suffers. This tragedy brings with it the risk of despair. The good news is that the cure for this disease is well known. It is, as Mary Wollstonecraft suggested, reason. Life in general must be made reasonable. This means we need a reasonable constitution as well as wise and virtuous citizens. Wisdom and virtue work together to prevent tyranny. Plato and Aristotle knew this, as did John Adams. Adams wrote in his diary when he was Vice President of the United States, quote, "Tyranny can scarcely be practiced upon a virtuous and wise people." But wisdom, virtue, and reason are often lacking. Wollstonecraft, I've got my Marys wrong. This is Wollstonecraft, I'm sorry. Wollstonecraft laments the fact that, quote, "Tyranny in whatever part of society it rears its brazen front will ever undermine morality. Tyranny is not only a political problem, it is also a moral and spiritual one. It afflicts our souls as well as churches, businesses, and family life." Wollstonecraft's important contribution was to argue that for the liberation of women in an era when women were oppressed by the tyranny of patriarchal families. Wollstonecraft was a contemporary of Thomas Jefferson and other thinkers of the 18th century Enlightenment. Despite their claims to enlightenment, the heroes of this tradition suffered from moral blindness, as we all do. Jefferson's words inspired a revolution against the tyrant King George III. The words inscribed in the Jefferson Memorial state, "I have sworn upon the altar of God eternal hostility against every form of tyranny over the mind of man." But Jefferson owned slaves, one of the more obvious forms of tyranny in the world. We must all be careful of our blind spots. Reason aims to shed light by holding up a mirror. The remedy for tyranny is philosophical self-examination. This is an ongoing process, not a panacea. Each generation must seek to make progress on their path to enlightenment. The good news is that we have made progress. Women were liberated and slavery was abolished. The idea that wisdom and virtue can cure tyranny predates the Enlightenment by over 2,000 years. It was the solution proposed by the ancient Greeks, who gave us the very language we will employ here. Words such as tyranny, sycophancy, democracy, and political philosophy. The Greeks emphasized the need for virtue among the players in the political drama. Modern thinkers built upon this and emphasized the need for a rational system of government that prevents tyranny. Tragedy is avoided when leaders and citizens are virtuous and when a stable constitutional system guarantees individual rights, divides power, and creates checks and balances. We have known the cure for thousands of years, but the disease is genetic. Every generation or so, the conditions conspire to bring together an ugly cast of characters that includes the tyrant, his sycophants, and the moronic fools who cheer him on. The book, Tyranny from Plato to Trump, by Andrew Fiala.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, usual, it's Friday the 13th. There's a blood moon and Mercury's retrograde. It doesn't get weirder than that for those of you who are superstitious out there. Happy Friday, TGIF, Shabbat Shalom, Juma Mubarak. We've got a lot to talk about today and a lot going on the program. It's, of course, Anything Goes Friday. Whatever you would like to talk about, you're welcome to give us a shout and we will get into it. I want to get into my op-ed today about how minority rule is killing America. Also, Senator Sheldon, Whitehouse, may drop by toward the end of this first hour about the future of Roe and how the Supreme Court got packed. Joyce Nance will be with us about the romantification, how do you say that word? Romancification, there we go, of crime inside the mind of Vicky White. You're going to find this fascinating at the top of the second hour. Also, more proof the Republican Party doesn't care about the born, as in babies, and that monopolies are a problem. We'll get into that, the whole baby formula thing. Plus the newest right-wing meme attacking the President Biden for feeding immigrant children. Really? Seriously? And and authoritarians love authoritarians. This in our third hour. Why Erdogan won't support Finland and Sweden joining NATO. I mean, it's getting weirder by the day. You've got Senator Rand Paul now, defending Russia and saying that we shouldn't be sending aid to Ukraine. And so he's forced the entire Senate to wait until next week to vote on this $30-40 billion aid package for Ukraine. The senator that John McCain said it works for Putin. Well, apparently John McCain was right. So anyhow, just a lot of craziness to talk about today. But to start out, my op-ed today over at HartmannReport.com is titled How Minority Rule is Killing America. And it really is. I mean, this is most obvious in the Supreme Court and the United States Senate, but it also extends to the U.S. House and to state capitals all over the country. And there's a couple of reasons for this. First of all, the problems with minority rule. With minority rule, we are going against nature. Nature is majority rule in almost every single case. You see a flock of birds going across the sky and suddenly they all turn at the same time, or it appears that way, right? As they're, changing direction or whatever. You see a school of fish swimming and then as if they're telepathically connected, they all move to the left and then move to the right. We've all seen this, right? You see it with a swarm of gnats or a swarm of bees. They all seem to move like they're telepathically linked. What's actually going on in this process, this swarming process, as it were, this migrating, or, it varies from species to species, is democracy. When more than 50% of the birds flying along have tilted themselves 2 or 3 degrees to the right, suddenly the whole flock moves 2 or 3 degrees to the right. When more than half of the fish have twitched themselves a little bit to the left, the whole school of fish swims to the left. It's democracy. Majority rules. And humans are wired this way too. I mean, this is something that's in the DNA of pretty much every animal on Earth, and it's there because we make better decisions when everybody's involved. Aristotle pointed this out in politics, 3,000 years ago, where he talked about even a large collection of bad people will produce a better result than any one individual. So this is us, right? This is how we're wired for majority rule. And yet, we have an electoral college that has given us 2 presidents who were rejected by the majority, George W. Bush and Donald Trump. The majority of Americans did not vote for them. They voted for somebody else, for Hillary Clinton and let's see, who was running against George? Oh, Al Gore. There we go. I got to think for a second. Al Gore and Hillary Clinton. I mean, this is straightforward stuff. You would think. Well, we've got the Electoral College because back in the day when they were putting the country together, our country was as big as all of continental Europe. It was huge. And there was no way that the American people could get to know a presidential candidate. Now, all of this became, an anachronism by the 1880s when the telegraph had pretty much, covered America. But
it was something that was arguably useful at the founding of the Republic, but we're still stuck with it. And the result is that it has been gamed. A small group of right-wing billionaires and religious fanatics have figured out how to game the system. And thus we got two presidents that weren't elected by the majority of the people in the last century. It's also the same thing happening with the Supreme Court. You have minority rule in the Senate, which I'll get to in just a second. So Mitch McConnell was able to withhold hearings for Merrick Garland, thus getting Neil Gorsuch into the court. Donald Trump apparently blackmailed Justice Kennedy into leaving the court. So we got beer bong Brett. And then, Ruth Bader Ginsburg died just before the election. Donald Trump loses the election, and boom, he instantly shoves, handmaiden Amy in there. Minority rule. The Senate itself. The Democrats in the Senate represent 41.5 million more Americans than do the Republicans. But the Senate is 50-50. And with the filibuster, the Republicans in the Senate have been able to block a whole lot of meaningful stuff that the Democrats want to do. This is minority rule. We see it in state after state: North Carolina, Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, Texas, Arizona, Tennessee. Kentucky, excuse me. You've got a bunch of states. Of all those states, only two of them have Republican governors. The rest all have Democratic. North Carolina have Democratic governors, because when you ask all the voters in the state, do you want a Democrat or Republican, they say, we want Democrats. And yet they're sending disproportionately Republican delegations to the U.S. House of Representatives, and their state House and their state Senates are controlled by Republicans, even though most people voted for Democrats. Why? Because of gerrymandering, minority rule. And this is tearing America apart. We are wired for fairness. You get 5 infants in a room. This doesn't even involve, sophisticated political thinking. You get 5 infants in a room, and you give each one of them a cookie, and everything's good. Give one of them an extra 5 cookies, and all hell breaks loose. We are wired for majority rule. We are wired for fairness. And we don't have that right now. And this needs to be at the very top of the Democratic Party's agenda. Unpacking and expanding the Supreme Court so that they reflect the opinions of the majority of Americans. Majority rule, number one. Number two, adding Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. as states to compensate for the fact that California has 39 million people. That's 2 million more people than the entire country of Canada. The economy of California is bigger than Russia's. And yet California has 2 senators, as does Wyoming, with a little over 500,000 people and an economy about the size of, Micronesia. And a population the size of that. Is that fair? No, it's not fair. So how do we rebalance that? We'll add a couple new states. Washington, D.C. should have been a state from the very beginning, and Puerto Rico wants to be a state. And then let's also do something about gerrymanders. Let's pass a and this was, by the way, this was in one of those pieces of legislation that Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema joined all of the Republicans in filibustering to say that, we're going to now draw congressional maps based on population, not on politics and not on race. Seems pretty straightforward to me. So what's on your mind today? We will pick up your phone calls on Anything Goes Friday here on the other side of this break. It's 15 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program, the place where smart people get their news. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back with your calls in just a moment. And welcome back. And Robert in Roswell, New Mexico. Hey, Robert, what's on your mind today?
want to talk about climate.
Okay,
and
go for it.
explosions. Okay. Purdue has developed an ultra-white paint. It reflects over 97% of the incoming energy. And the University of Colorado has developed a relatively cheap passive film that re-radiates through the atmospheric window heat and requires no energy at all to run. Stanford, I believe, has developed a different system, but they all require very little energy to run. A lot of the energy that the United States uses is for air conditioning. We would reduce the amount of fuel required for air conditioning and help the global warming situation.
I get the air conditioning part of it. The problem with global warming is you would have to put those reflective coatings at the top of the stratosphere, I guess, in order to reflect heat back out to outer space, because heat reflected off the surface of the world gets trapped by the atmosphere. That's the whole, that's the greenhouse effect.
There's an atmospheric window for radiation that can escape from the heat. That's why you get thermal cooling in the evening.
Yeah, it's not all escaping into outer space, though. Most of it is just escaping into the upper atmosphere where it's, 40, 50 degrees below zero. Even at 30,000 feet, where airplanes fly, which is still well within the troposphere, you've got temperatures, of minus 30 out there.
Yes, I understand that. But there is an atmospheric window where the energy of a certain wavelength can escape.
Okay. I guess I'll take your word for it. Where is that window?
Let's see. I believe it's from 11 microns to 20 microns.
And is infrared radiation, is heat radiation in that part of the frequency spectrum?
Yes. As a matter of fact,
why doesn't heat radiate out? Why do we have the greenhouse effect?
Because
what am I missing?
The re-radiation from the non-white surfaces or non-radiating surfaces that are at this particular temperature gets reflected back. There's some evidence from the archaeological record, and actually it's working today, that they made ice in Persia from this effect.
Okay, Robert, you've either exceeded or contradicted my understanding of climate science. I'm not, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt and not argue with you, but I don't get it. Robert, thank you for the call, though, and it would be great if you were absolutely right. I hope that's the case. It's 19 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. They often say that Republican Senator from Wisconsin, Ron Johnson, is the stupidest guy in the entire United States Senate. I get it. Tommy Tuberville gives him a run for his money, but he just came out with what has to be at least the very stupidest idea of the year. Ron Johnson is proposing, there's a shortage of child care workers right now in America. There's a whole bunch of good reasons for that. But he has proposed a solution. His suggestion, any woman in America who's getting any kind of public assistance, you're getting food stamps, you're getting, tuition relief, whatever it may be, you would be forced to go into daycare centers and care for children. Yeah,
Seriously. This is Ron Johnson's idea. People who had no training, and one of his assistants said, well, it's just like teachers who teach in public schools where their own kids attend. No, it's not. These are not trained professionals. There's no union. This is nuts. There's a whole video about it over at thomhartmann.com. Check it out. And welcome back. Anything Goes Friday. Cliff in Santa Clarita, California. Hey, Cliff, what's on your mind today?
Good morning, Tom. George Bush and Dick Cheney are still war criminals, and they always will be.
Amen.
Hey, I'm going to give a couple examples of which there are many. Remember back when Ralph Reed and all the right-wing politicians, when gay marriage was starting to be proposed? And for them, the next logical step was people marrying their pets.
Yeah, I remember having those people come on this program and try to make that case. Next, people are going to want to marry their dogs. And I'm like, really?
Right. And then the cannabis debate. Remember, before the cannabis thing was happening, they were talking about traffic fatalities are going to go up and people are going to wreck their cars.
Oh yeah,
I haven't heard any statistics. Yeah, I haven't heard any statistics about that, but to the best of my knowledge, that didn't occur.
Well, I guarantee you, if it had, there would be people yelling and screaming about it from the tobacco industry, or excuse me, the alcohol industry. They would have hired a PR firm, and everybody in America would know about it. And I haven't heard of anybody wanting to marry their dog.
Right, of course. What I'm talking about is this fabricated hysteria that these people bring up. I think the newest one is, critical race theory and liberal indoctrination.
Right.
It's just more fabricated nonsense. And I'm just hoping at some point, Tom, that more people realize that they're just being bamboozled by these folks and that they could think for themselves and see through this malarkey, as Mr. Biden would say.
Right. Well said, Cliff. These things are, by the way, they're called moral panics. And this is what the Republican Party has had to resort to because they've got nothing else. They've got nothing for the American people other than bigotry and hate. And so they invent these moral panics and then they try to they campaign on them. And it works for a short period of time and then it's gone. Cliff, thank you for the call. Justin in Maui, Hawaii. Hey, Justin, what's on your mind today?
Aloha Friday, Tom.
Aloha.
So I wanted to express my enthusiasm and excitement and kind of focus attention on next week's first congressional hearings on UFOs, the first in 50 years.
Isn't that going to be fascinating, Justin? I'm looking forward to it.
I mean, our culture has been fascinated with this from movies like Fire in the Sky, Close Encounters, and then you have all these supposed, government officials working with private people like Bob Lazar and Stephen Greer and Jeremy Corbell and Tom DeLonge. And it's really, I'm excited. I mean, this has been the biggest question of my life. And I was just curious, I feel, listening to your show, that we're not very intelligent species and we're in need of an intervention. And, I was just wondering what you were going to do next week, if you were going to cover it, if you were going to bring other people on to talk about it, because this is really important.
I don't know. We haven't had a conversation about it. I'll have to discuss it with Sean and Louise, which is the three of us are kind of the who's going to be on the show team. But thanks for reminding me, Justin. And it's definitely worth flagging. I am very much looking forward to it.
I believe the whole thought is to our government doesn't really know what this is. There's a lot of different things to go into, but they have a lot of information, and it's better that we all have some sort of knowledge of what they know. So even if they can't tell us, exactly what it is or where it's from, and let's just all, get into this together and not be afraid of not knowing everything.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think I was 6 years old when my dad gave me a copy of George Adamski's Inside the Flying Saucers Have Landed or Inside the Spaceships. And it was an amazing book. Anyhow, Marty in Wixom, Michigan. Hey, Marty, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Love your show.
Thank you.
In contrast to the terrible media coverage that he received, I'd like to argue that history will record Joe Biden as one of the greatest U.S. presidents. And if you'll allow me...
Build your case. You have a minute.
All right. Well, with the exception of Abraham Lincoln and Franklin Roosevelt, no president has ever faced greater challenges. And no president in history has faced a large number and variety of crises in such a short period of time. Folks should recall that when he took office, he faced both the worst health pandemic in 100 years, as well as the worst economic recession since the Great Depression. And it's easy to forget he also faced an absolutely unprecedented situation where the prior president was attempting a coup and refusing to concede transition of power.
Yep.
No other president has faced that magnitude of combined crises, and his record in response has been phenomenal. He inherited a situation with only 2% of the public vaccinated, and over 3,000 people a day were dying of COVID. In just a year, he made life-saving vaccinations universally available at no charge, got 70% of the population vaccinated. He also inherited a deep economic recession with unemployment at 6.8% and rising. He passed the American Rescue Plan, created 7.4 million jobs.
There you go. Marty, I'm sorry we're out of time, but it's a great list. Thank you very much for the call. 27 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is by Brian J. Karam. It's titled Free the Press, The Death of American Journalism and How to Revive It. This is from the very last chapter, page 265. My father once told me that if you have a complaint, then you'd better have a solution. People bitch about everything, he routinely told me. They seem to like it more than solving problems. I've often thought about that as I spent a career covering the news. It is increasingly popular to merely ignore those things with which we don't agree and treat people the same way. That's hardly a solution. It only creates more problems. My pop also preached to me about adaptability, as did Alan, and that is a lesson I've tried to apply to every part of my life, to adapt. By the time Alan was preaching the same thing, it was a lesson I'd already learned, though it's still much appreciated. Today, the changing media landscape calls for adherence to some of our strictest tenets, while at the same time adapting to how we deliver the news to the public. Our democracy demands it. The local paper is perilously close to completely disappearing. Large swaths of this country live in news deserts. According to a study published by Axios in June 2021, the United States has lost some 37,000 newsroom jobs since 2016. And according to a study released on May 1st, 2021, by the University of North Carolina's School of Media and Journalism, more than 1,300 communities across the United States have lost all news coverage. Among the findings in the study, about 20% of all metro and community newspapers in the United States, about 1,800, have gone out of business or merged since 2004, when about 9,000 were being published. Hundreds more have scaled back coverage so much that they're becoming what researchers call ghost newspapers. Almost all of the newspapers still publishing have also scaled back, just less drastically. Online news sites, as well as some TV newsrooms and cable access channels, are working hard to keep local reporting alive, but these are taking root more slowly than newspapers are dying. Hence the 1,300 communities that have lost all local coverage. To adapt to this undeniable fact, we have to make newspapers more viable and easier to sustain. We cannot afford to let newsrooms disappear because they play a vital role in delivering information that the internet cannot reproduce. When you go to the internet, you're usually on a hard target searching for information. When you pick up a newspaper, you're scanning for information and are open to read anything presented to you. You may not know what to search for, but you know what you want to read when you find it. Newspapers are smorgasbords of information. The internet isn't and cannot be set up that way. So how do we save newspapers? There are a variety of business models currently under consideration. Nonprofits hold promise, but as of yet, we haven't gotten the needed solution or the needed traction. A big push was made to save the Baltimore Sun through a nonprofit, and this may indeed be the best way to save newspapers, since the job they do for society is completely incompatible with capitalism. Quote, "There's no question about it. I don't think any problem facing the country is more severe than what is facing our news information infrastructure," end quote, Michael Copps, formerly of the Federal Communications Commission, told me. Quote, "I saw it. First call I got was from the chairman when I joined the FCC was about the merger of Fox and Chris Kraft. That set the tone. I was going to the FCC. I thought going to the FCC was the coolest job on earth. We'd be serving the public. And then I realized I spent a lot of time meeting with CEOs who wanted to seek approval of their mergers. The FCC more often than not approved the mergers. Then a rival would come in and gripe and say in order to compete, they had to have a merger too," end quote. The free market obviously isn't the answer. It only allows politics and information today to be played and reported on as sport. Walter Cronkite, Dan Rather, and others saw it coming. This is a very steep mountain to climb, and there is no commercial solution to the problem. The corporate consolidation, as Copps told me, is too embedded in the system. How do you get beyond that? The government has to exercise its antitrust laws, and we need to think about public media. Put the brakes on corporate mergers. Subsidies are the key, Victor Picard, the University of Pennsylvania communications professor, explained to me. He works at the intersections of U.S. and global media activities and politics, the history and political economy of media institutions, and the normative foundations of media policy. Quote, "It's the commercialization, the dedication to clickbait, and profits above all else. That's what's driving this. There's no commercial incentive to do it right. Journalism often isn't sexy," end quote, he said. While there isn't one perfect model, Picard said he could see subsidized subscribers or a voucher plan. Everybody gets a $100 voucher and they can buy media of their choice. It guarantees a certain method of support. Subsidize the news outlets themselves. My preference is to radically expand and reform our public broadcast system so that they can actually be politically independent, end quote. Pickard also supports public media centers in every city across the country, public libraries, schools, and journalism schools. That's my radical plan. It's healthy to have a mixed system, independents, nonprofits, public benefit corporations, and standards for for-profit companies. The driving force today in journalism is capitalism, and it's driving our journalism into the ground. The book is Free the Press, The Death of American Journalism and How to Revive It. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. And welcome back to Anything Goes Friday. Mike in Tonnesket, Washington. Hey, Mike, what's on your mind today?
Happy Friday, Tom.
Back at you, Mike.
There are going to be rallies happening all over the country from coast to coast this Saturday.
Going to be what happening? Protests.
There are going to be rallies over this Roe v. Wade thing.
Yeah.
We're going to have rallies coast to coast. And what I would urge any listener or watcher that has blank voter registration forms, go to that rally and pass those forms out like candy.
You betcha.
And tell people. I've yet to hear a Democrat to frame this in the proper perspective, but this is what I've been telling women under 30 as I pass them voter registration forms, is this is what people get when they vote for Republicans. If you don't like this, get registered, get voting, and vote for Democrats. When you're out there passing out forms at the rally, too, get contact information for people that might want to door knock or phone call later on for the primaries and the general election. This is the best place to get volunteers. And a lot of the people that show up to the rally are probably registered, but I'll bet you my house that they've got friends and relatives and neighbors that think just like we do, like the polls say 80% of the time, okay? But they're not registered and they're not voting.
Yeah, I'm with you.
We have to tap into.
There's one other thing that you could do too, and that is take the home page for your local Democratic Party on the internet. Hopefully it has the contact information on it, and just
print copies of that. It would have the URL on that copy so people could easily find it. It would have the phone number and say, show up, get involved, join.
Well, see, that's an excellent idea. I just got an email from our county chair, Okanagan County Democrats, and she asked, "Can you, when you get your list, can you turn it over to me?" And I said, "Immediately, yeah." Because whatever activist stuff you want to do, you want to coordinate it with your local Democrats, especially if there's a candidate running, because the candidate might want to get out and door knock with you.
Right, but you can get that information. You could get that information right into people's hands by simply printing out the homepage of your local Democratic Party, or creating a version of it. If they fail to have the contact information right up there up front. Mike, brilliant. Thank you so much for that.
I'm gonna email Katie and make sure that she includes that in our effort.
There you go. Okay, Mike, thank you. Ron in Chicago. Hey, Ron, what's on your mind today?
Yes. If the Republicans gain control of the House and Senate in November, what are some of their ideas? Repealing child labor laws, the minimum wage, or maybe even repealing the 19th Amendment?
Well, you've got one state that is already working on, I believe it was the legislature in Wisconsin, they wanted to repeal, maybe I have that wrong, but I reported on it yesterday. My recollection is it was Wisconsin. They want to repeal the child labor laws so that kids can work until 11 p.m., because the fast food restaurants don't want to pay enough to attract, people who aren't 14, 16 years old, whatever. I mean, what's next on their agenda? I would say, all of the above. It's, we are looking at, more banned books and the destruction of our public education system, replacing it with private schools that are run, along white supremacist right-wing lines. It just goes on and on, Ron.
No limit.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot for the call. George in Chicago. Hey, George, what's on your mind today?
Oh, so much. Last week I called you and spoke on how the Big Bang led to Black Lives Matter. I don't know if you remember, but it was too long because it was really a rant that I was trying to get out. But like I said, it was a rant slogan. So I thought on the lines this week of how they use these words, and I know I've talked about this before, how they use woke. How woke is one of their things to try to monster who we are. But who we are is, in this, I think I can see blue, like a blue ocean of hats marked with "Wake Up to the Truth." I like it a lot. That's a good one, George. Thank you very much. You think you can use that and put that out? Because I'm an 82-year-old man, and I can't work on the internet. So, like, if that idea could just motivate through some order to be out there, like, wake up to the truth. Yeah. It's a simple thing. I get it, George. I think it's brilliant. And, wake up to the truth. Absolutely. I love it. Thank you. Katie in Hamul, California. Hey, Katie, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. This is kind of quick, and maybe I misunderstood what you said yesterday, but you were talking about the exporting of oil, and then you had corrected yourself and said that wasn't something that Trump had signed off on. It was something that President Obama had. Right. In 2015, yeah. Okay, so why did Obama do that when it was potentially, detrimental to the U.S.? What was his... I have no idea. Frankly, I know that this was promoted by all the Republicans. All the Republicans were gung-ho in favor of this. The oil industry, of course, wanted it. And my point. and there was a handful of Democrats who were in favor of it. And I'm guessing that it had to do probably mostly with that, with some sort of a massive lobbying effort. And, Obama just wasn't willing to veto it and take the political heat over it. But I frankly have no idea. There were a number of, I'll just leave it at that. Listen, let me tell you something before the music gets. I want the UFO program. We all need it. Yeah, okay. You've got it, Katie. Thank you.
2 votes for UFOs, Katie and Justin. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And on the other side of this break, we're going to have a real quick conversation with Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, and then we'll continue. I'll be picking up your calls. Stick around. And welcome back. 41 minutes past the hour. Larry in Hazel Green, Alabama. Hey, Larry, what's on your mind today? Larry?
Al Gore has always been ahead of his time, and I recently reread his 2007 book, The Assault on Reason.
Uh-huh.
And in that, he points out that the human evolved to be easily distracted because he had to respond to things in his environment that might eat him.
Correct.
And Gore says there's a part of the brain that does that by instinct, bypassing reason and thought, because it works faster. So the first thing that hits is that instinct part.
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes on to point out that with cable TV news, you're always being hit with these short stories and then the short commercials, and if you watch that all day long, that first part that does instinct is getting hit, but the part that does thought and reason atrophies, and there are actually changes in the brain, and it makes us stupid.
Yeah.
And now we've got TikTok and Twitter and whatever else, so it's even worse. And have you noticed in the doctor's waiting room, there are no longer any old magazines because everybody's sitting there looking at their phone and poking their phones.
Right.
You know, the other day I did see a lady with a book, and I had to compliment her on that. And I've seen it. People are getting dumber.
Yeah, it seems.
For 10 years, I was an election worker, and one of my duties was put up the sample ballots on the wall, and I was nearby, and people would look at those. I was in a Republican precinct, and everybody looking at the ballots were looking for the R's next to the names.
Mm-hmm.
You know, your dog's Chewy and Bluey, you can teach them to tell an R from a D.
Probably.
And that's where most of these people were.
Yeah.
Many of them were my friends and neighbors, and, you know, many of them would make a sack of rocks look smart.
Mm-hmm.
So now you know why I'm cynical and distressed, because I'm thinking about a second Trump administration.
Yeah,
and it won't be like Hitler. It'll be like Stalin.
I agree, or it'll start out like Mussolini. But I agree, Larry. Thank you, Patty in Columbus, Ohio. Hey, Patty, thanks for watching us on Facebook Live. What's up?
Yeah, happy Friday, Tom, and also belated happy birthday, sir.
Thank you.
You had a gentleman on the program yesterday, the author, that said we ought to have nonviolent demonstrations. And I just finished a book, We the Resistance by Michael Long, a foreword by Chris Hedges, documenting the history of nonviolent protests in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my question is, why haven't we seen the kind of demonstrations you and I saw when we grew up? You and I are the same age. Is it out of fear or ignorance or both? Why weren't those demonstrations that should have happened and didn't?
I think that there's been a general dumbing down, sadly. I mean, you know, when Bill Bennett came into the Reagan administration, you know, the guy who said that we could eliminate crime by aborting every black baby in America, we pretty much ended civics education, or at least federal support for civics education across the United States with the Reagan administration. And this massive effort to destroy our public school system that people like Betsy DeVos have been pioneering has not helped the situation, shall we say. We'll be back with Senator Sheldon Whitehouse in just a moment. Stick around. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. And with us today is Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, the senator from Rhode Island. Whitehouse.senate.gov is his website. Sen Whitehouse is his Twitter handle. And Senator, welcome back to the program. I'm curious to get your thoughts, given that this weekend we're going to have nationwide demonstrations about Sam Alito's draft opinion on Roe v. Wade. I'm curious your thoughts on the future of Roe and of abortion rights in the United States, and how that might interact with other human rights, and also how the Supreme Court got packed this way.
Well, I don't think Roe has a very bright future with this court. They may want to back off a little bit from the Alito opinion, just to try to give themselves a little bit of cover. But I think the directionality is absolutely crystal clear. I think that there's more to worry about in the Alito decision than just its views on abortion, because the reason it blows up the right of a woman to have an abortion is because it's not founded in the Constitution, and it's a gravely skeptical opinion about the general right to privacy, which is the original right off of which the abortion right depends. But plenty of other rights depend off of that right to privacy as well, including the right to marry who you wish, whether they're same sex or whether they're different race, and the right to have contraception without the state regulating it. There are a lot of privacy rights out there, and this decision was a torpedo at the fundamental privacy right doctrine. And this is just one piece of a much larger portfolio that this radical Supreme Court has, because they were put on the court to be radical by big right-wing dark money interests who now see this as their payday. They picked judges who they knew would do the crazy stuff they want them to do. That was what their goal was, and to see it working should come as no surprise.
So how did these guys get in a position to be essentially picking Supreme Court judges for the United States? This is another dimension of minority rule, it seems. And how did they pull it off? I realize this has been a kind of a 40-year effort, or maybe even longer.
Yeah, it's been a long effort. They had to build a lot of infrastructure. They had to build a lot of phony front groups. They had to recruit a lot of politicians who'd be willing to go along with the gag. But the real machinery was when Donald Trump said he was going to pick Federalist Society judges. That's where it kind of surfaced. And the Federalist Society was able to pick 3 judges, and they did so with a process that was completely off the books in a back room at the time when they were receiving huge anonymous contributions. So the most logical conclusion to draw is that somebody was paying very large amounts of money to be in the room when the lists of who could be a Supreme Court justice and when the selection of the Supreme Court justice was being done. Weird enough that this was outsourced to a private organization, never happened before in history, not in any country that I know of. But weirder still that the process was so freaky and secret, and that there was so much dark money swirling around it. And if that wasn't enough, then once they had the names, they had another private organization, also funded by dark money, run the ad campaigns against Garland, for Gorsuch, for Kavanaugh, for Barrett. And then if that wasn't enough, once they've got them on the court, they've got a whole array of phony front groups that turn up as what are called amicus curiae, friends of the court, who file briefs in orchestrated chorus that tell the selected judges what to do. And by gum, who knew? They seem to always win.
So one of the reasons why I keep saying that I want you to be our next Attorney General is that you have your finger on this stuff. Who are these people who are funding this? Is it just Citizens United and its forebearers going back to Buckley and Bellotti and whatnot that have enabled this? Who are these people, and how are they able to wield such power that they've essentially taken over an entire branch of the United States government?
It's a long story than longer story than we have, but Center for Media and Democracies has been able to dig out total spending on this of $580 million.
Wow.
And that's just what they've been able to dig out. There are dozens of groups associated with it that are all very coordinated. And there's kind of a feedback loop between the enterprise that packs the court and what the court does for the enterprise that packs the court. And as you pointed out, it started with Alati and then went on through an array of other decisions that one by one added more and more corporate political power when the Constitution has none, zero, none. They've added more and more corporate power. And then in Citizens United, by not enforcing its transparency terms and allowing huge rivers of dark money to flow, they've actually created an unlimited dark money corporate political power operation. Not in the Constitution, created by Republican appointees on the court in a steady program that has worked in, I guess you'd call it syncopation, with the $580 million plus worth of political effort on the other side.
Now, I'm looking at separate groups that have their own hobby horses, their own special interests. You've got the libertarian ideologues. You know, David Koch has passed away now, but famously ran for president or vice president in 1980 on the libertarian ticket on a platform of, end Social Security, end Medicare, do away with all regulatory agencies, get rid of the income tax, et cetera. So you've got these crazed right-wing ideologues. That's one group. You've got people like his brother, presumably, and others in the oil business and big business who chafe at having their industries regulated. They could make more money if they could put more poison into the air or into the water. That kind of thing. You've got the religious freaks who are essentially America's Taliban, who think that women should be completely under the thumb of men. And next they're going to be going after women wearing short shorts or something like that. I mean, they have in the past. I'm old enough to remember this from the 1950s and 60s. So you've got the religious nuts or prudes or whatever you want to say. You've got some that are organized. You've got the evangelical, the white supremacist evangelical movement, or at least the white supremacist part of the evangelical movement, and the Catholic Church, who are very interested in ending abortion. To what extent do each of these...
And then you've got the Republican political network that wants to have the rules of political engagement in the country cooked so that minority voters have a harder time voting and that big corporate dark money has an easier time influencing.
Exactly.
So it's a wide array, and the good news for all of those rascals is that if they can capture and control the Supreme Court, they all get to share in the feast.
So are they collaborating with each other, or is
Absolutely.
there a lot of overlap? How so? How does this happen?
A lot of overlap. Well, it's a bigger picture than this, and again, it would take a lot of time, but let me just focus on one group. First of all, they tend to operate in pairs. What's called a 501c3 and a 501c4. They tend to be twinned, same address, same staff, same donors, same everything. No real corporate veil between the two. But then you get groups that spin off of them that are not real groups. They're just like a fictitious name for the original pair to operate through. So you've got the Judicial Crisis Network, which was involved in spending the money on the ads against Garland for Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, Barrett. So they were in the court packing scheme. And that's like one fictitious name of that group. But then you go on to the Honest Elections Project, and that's a voter suppression operation. It's not related to the courts. It's voter suppression stuff. And they have their own fictitious name, but it's actually the same entity. And then they created one called Free to Learn, which is out to get people outraged about critical race theory and scare people about what's going on in classrooms. So one's about education, one's about voting, one's about packing the court, and they're all actually the same legal entity.
Wow. Is there any, we have about a minute and a half left here, is there any analog to that in the Democratic Party? And how tied to the Republican Party are these groups?
They would love to say that there is. And there's a very conspicuous operation being run by the Republican dark money operation to try to smear groups on the Democratic side as being equivalent. And the fact of the matter is we're late to the game. We're not even close. And we don't have anything like the power, clout, or collaboration of the groups on their side. Moreover, although we do dark money, it tends to be kind of, people who want to do good and to have their views reflected in politics. Whereas on the Republican side, it is a money-making operation. These are groups that can put $1,000 into politics and makes $100,000 in deregulation. They can put $6 million into politics and make $6 billion in free pollution and tax breaks. So there's a persistence and a motive to the Republican side of this that we don't share.
Yeah, and therefore the billionaires on the Democratic side, the few that we know of, tend to be more interested in good government than advancing a personally selfish agenda. Extraordinary.
And that's why when we bring up the Disclose Act, every Democrat is going to vote for it, and almost no Republicans will, if any. None have so far.
Sadly. Senator Sheldon, Whitehouse, one of the great guys. Whitehouse.senate.gov. Send Whitehouse on Twitter. Senator, thank you so much for dropping by today.
Thanks, Tom.
Always great talking with you. We will be back with Anything Goes Friday. We'll continue our conversations on the other side of this break. Stick around. Oh, Joyce is going to be with us, too.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy by Thom Hartmann. More information at all book outlets. Wild Alaskan Company, 100% sustainable wild-caught seafood delivered right to your door. More info at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. Cozy Earth, better sleep, better you. More info at cozyearth.com, promo code TOM. The latest views and opinions from U.S. politics and other fascinating subjects too, including cutting-edge science reports at hartmanreport.com. And Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at dinovite.com.
We say fight back!
Today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy. This is from the introduction, titled The Big Picture of Social Control versus Democracy. This book deals with two very large and often amorphous concepts, privacy and surveillance in the context of government and the marketplace. Both concepts have undergone changes over the millennia of recorded human history, and those changes have dramatically sped up and expanded over the past few centuries, starting with the widespread use of the printing press in the mid to late 15th century, when books and newspapers began to proliferate across Europe, and in the rest of the civilized world by the end of the 17th century, civilized in quotes. The development of radio, television, and the internet in the 20th century heightened the need to define more clearly what both concepts meant and how they applied both to governments, the public sector, and to individual and corporate players, the private sector. The thought police and Big Brother are terms introduced into the popular lexicon by George Orwell in his novel 1984. Big Brother was the overweening, all-powerful government of Orwell's novel, and the thought police were those who managed to burrow so deeply into every citizen's behavior, speech, and even thoughts that they could control or punish behavior based on the slightest deviations from orthodoxy. Orwell was only slightly off the mark. Big Brother types of government and thought police types of social control are now widespread in the world and incompatible with democracy, as I'll show in more detail later in the book. Most concerning for Americans and citizens of other democratic nations, end quote, the mentality of both has heavily infiltrated both American government and corporate sectors, reaching so deeply into the day-to-day details of our lives that the techniques and technologies they use can and do not only control, but predict our behavior. The goals of those who violate privacy and use surveillance is almost always social control and behavior modification. Setting aside pure voyeurism, these are the areas where money is made, power is accumulated, and political or business goals are reached. And whether they are of government or of corporate Big Brother, the goals are largely the same and consistent with those just mentioned. Secrets are now for government and giant corporations to know and hold, but not for average people. And they're used by Big Brother to both acquire and hold power. J. Edgar Hoover had secrets to hide, for example, so he knew well their power. A gay man at the pinnacle of American power for most of his life, the FBI director knew that in many U.S. states, he and his lover, Clyde Tolson, could be prosecuted and sent to prison for their private, consensual behavior. Yet Hoover and Tolson lived together, and their relationship was an open secret among Washington's cognoscenti. I still remember a beautiful summer day in Ireland, Louise and I sitting in the living room of author Anthony Summers and his wife Robin, as they described to us the shocking details of Hoover's life and abuses of power they'd uncovered writing Official and Confidential, The Secret Life of J. Edgar Hoover. That books like Summers weren't published until after Hoover's death is a striking testimonial to the power of surveillance and the blackmail material it can produce to keep powerful people's secrets hidden even from the world's best investigative journalists. Every politician or reporter of any consequence knew that Hoover had a file on him. They were almost all men back then, and powerful men at that time were far more likely to harbor salacious secrets, ensuring Hoover an unbroken hold over the FBI from its founding in 1935 to his 1977 death. But Hoover didn't use his massive FBI surveillance powers just to cow politicians and reporters. He was also interested in advancing policies close to his heart. A dedicated white supremacist running an FBI where all meaningful power was held in white hands throughout his life, Hoover, or an underling at his behest, famously sent FBI surveillance tapes of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. having an extramarital affair to the civil rights leader himself, implying that they'd next go to his wife and the public if he didn't commit suicide. Hoover also spent his entire career downplaying the role of Italian organized crime in the United States because, among other things, mafia godfather Santo Trafficante had the goods on his sexual orientation and regularly hosted him and Tolson for gambling junkets. When, in 1961, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy overruled Hoover and began prosecuting the mob, with the number of cases brought shooting up from dozens annually to over 700 a year in the early 1960s, the mafia backlash eventually destroyed the Kennedy dynasty. There's a more modern story of how surveillance and invasions of privacy have impacted American politics. The rise to the presidency of serial rapist, wannabe fascist, and crooked businessman Donald Trump. The biggest Big Brother of the corporate world, Facebook, had for years been compiling massive troves of personal data on Americans, even Americans without a Facebook account, as any page with a Facebook logo on it can send your browsing activity back to Facebook. And sometime in the mid-2010s, Cambridge Analytica hired a data scientist to put together an app that could suck down that data without Facebook's knowledge. Cambridge once bragged that they ended up with more than 4,000 data points on each of 230 million Americans. The book, The Hidden History of Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy, by Thom Hartmann.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And welcome back to the second hour of our program. You know, there was this fascinating story over the past week, past 2 weeks, I guess, actually, about Casey White and Vicky White, two unrelated people. Casey was a convicted murderer, or I guess he was convicted. And Vicky White was a corrections officer, and they escaped. She helped him escape from jail, and they went on an 11-day statewide spree. They got out of the Lauderdale County Jail in Florence, Alabama on April 29th, and 300 miles away they got busted. And Casey surrendered, and Vicky was found dead with a gunshot wound, self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. And I find this whole romancification of crime fascinating, and we just happen to have an expert on this topic in-house, an award-winning documentarian, the author of 5 books. You can find them on Amazon or wherever you find books, including Escaping the Arroyo and Reel to Reel, the video store murders. Joyce Nance. Joyce has written these true crime novels, essentially, that are just absolutely brilliant. Her website on Facebook is facebook.com/Joyce Nance, Nance, author. And Joyce also, generally speaking, is answering phone calls on this program. Hey, Joyce.
Hey, how's it going, Tom?
Great to hear from you inside the call screening room there. So you've written about these people. In fact, you visited, for one of your books, if I remember correctly, you visited somebody who was a convicted murderer in prison for weeks over the course of a year. Tell us about that.
Yes, I on my book, Reel to Reel, the video store murders, one of the convicted criminals was a woman that was living at the New Mexico Women's Penitentiary outside of Grants, and I was in Albuquerque. And so I spent about a year going about twice a week. I mean, not twice a week, twice a month. To go visit her, and so I could understand her as a person, and that was very important to me to have that inside information. For the book that you were writing, yeah. Yes. So what is it? How did Vicky White, in your opinion, based on the books you've written about this and the actual murderers that you've known and interviewed, how did Casey White convince Vicky White to break him out of jail? He was in his mid-30s, she was in her mid-50s. How does that dynamic work out? I don't know exactly how theirs worked out, but I do know that there is a lot of cases where men convince women to do stuff that they wouldn't otherwise do. And I don't know if it was he convinced her or she convinced him, because she was actually the person in real power in that case. But, I assume that there was some romantic involvement, at least intellectually at first. And they decided to act on it, and she had the wherewithal to pull it off. Isn't this the sort of thing where you've got, in this case, Casey White, the man who's almost certainly a psychopath? I mean, he's a convicted murderer. And psychopaths can be very, not just clever, but they can be very charming. They figure out the particular weakness or need that their victim has and then use that against them. Do I have that right? Yes, they are very charming. In fact, when I was visiting the woman in the penitentiary, I enjoyed talking to her. I would go for 2 or 3 hours at a time. And she enjoyed having me there because I brought quarters so that she could put in the vending machines and eat better, basically. But, she was charming. And I was like, oh, maybe I should still continue to talk to her. I'm like, no, right. That's not a good idea. But other criminals that were in some of my books, they, especially the one in that book, the man, that's how he got everything that he got, was through his quote unquote charming ways.
Wow. So are there any, policy prescriptions or laws or things that we should be thinking about or talking about to deal with this kind of situation? Or is this is human nature and there's nothing we can do about it? And, it's mostly we just need to warn people about the dangers of charming psychopaths.
Well, the thing of it is what I consider the romanticization of the true crime is the sensational nature that is broadcasted on the news media, and for some reason attracts a lot of women. They have a couple of stations like the Investigation Discovery Channel and another web-only law and crime channel by Dan Abrams, where it's 24/7 true crime. And those are watched nonstop. And it's because people want to feel a connection to these people, but not be too close. It's the media that, because they every detail about the criminal, but very little about the victim.
That's very interesting. It's sort of like, like walking by a rattlesnake, it's like we're fascinated by it. We don't want to get too close to it. And, if they're in jail, it's kind of a safe distance kind of thing. Is that?
Yeah, I think it's a safe distance and the bad boy thing. And, to some extent, it's about beating the system of these people that have, portrayed themselves as charming but dangerous people. Some of them are in politics.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely believe so. Did you when you were interviewing prisoners and writing your 5 books, and I know you've been on some of these TV programs as well talking about this stuff, did you ever run across anybody who had also been in politics?
I had not come across anybody that had also been in politics. I was dealing with pretty old crimes, and so I mainly focused on the criminals and the victims.
Yeah. So now we've got some elected officials or people running for political office who are just proud of the fact, essentially, that they beat up their wives and stuff. I mean, it's totally
There's
bizarre.
one that just ran for office from jail for, I think, beating up his wife.
You're right. Yeah, for killing his wife. For killing his wife. Yeah, and he won. He won this Republican
right. So there's
position.
the personification of the whole thing all in one stroke.
I guess it is absolutely extraordinary. Joyce Nance, a member of our team here on the Thom Hartmann Program, an award-winning documentarian, the author of 5 books, including Escaping the Arroyo and Reel to Reel, the Video Store Murderers. Facebook.com/Joyce Nance author. Joyce, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
It's great having you on the program. We will be right back with your calls here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Anything Goes Friday. Stick around. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's Anything Goes Friday, Friday the 13th edition, here on the Thom Hartmann Program, fair and only slightly unbalanced. Ever run across a psychopath? And welcome back. Patrick in Chicago. Hey, Patrick, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Real quick, I'm on Twitter at the AgroProg. I just wanted to say that progressives or anyone who's ever been looking for a third party has great news. The progressives are that third party. All they need to do is recognize that they are currently running in a 3-party system, that being the Republican Party, the corporate Democrats, and the progressives. And the corporate Democrats are just...
They're fading.
The easiest way for the easiest way, in my opinion, for the Progressive Party to effectively run against both of these parties as one, because that's what they need to do. They need to bring this party back to this country back to a 2-party system. So the Republicans are pretty much unified. They're a lost cause. Like they're done. So you can pretty much just lock them in with these corporate Democrats, and you can call them oligarchs, which is delegates for the oligarchy. And if you do that, as progressives, you can rebrand, or the Progressive Caucus, if they can rebrand themselves as something catchy, in my opinion, as like the Democratic Progressives, and you can shorten that to the Demo-Progs or the Dem-Progs. And both of those, small enough to fit on a bumper sticker, small enough to post wherever you can. And, yeah, if they can do that, in my opinion, they have a real shot. We have 2 years under the protection of Biden as the president to employ the strategy and get as many progressives and aggressive progressives. That's what we need. Aggressive progressives in Congress to fight back against both of these parties. And, yeah, you can just that's my opinion.
Yeah, I'm with you, Patrick. And the delicate dance is not to eventually replace the corporate Democrats with progressive Democrats, but not to do so quickly that you lose your majorities. I mean, that's why I'm not in favor of, bouncing out Joe Manchin, for example, right now. Let's let the electoral process happen and have him primaried, him and Kyrsten Sinema. But, spot on. Patrick, great analysis. Thank you. Tim in Seattle. Hey, Tim, what's up? Tim, you there?
Hello?
Yeah. Hey, you're on the air.
A second.
Okay, that's not working at all. Let's go to Jill in West Collingwood Heights, New Jersey. Hey, Jill, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I'm going to try to do this really quickly because it's very difficult. I was abused as a child by a family friend, in air quotes, and raped as an adult. And both are violations and injuries to the soul. The soul doesn't heal from this. It can be bandaged enough to function, but it doesn't heal. It was over 70 years ago that I was abused, and I can still close my eyes and smell the man. It was like a wet ashtray and bad breath, which is pretty awful.
Wow.
I can't imagine the damage they want to force on our daughters and and our granddaughters. It would prolong the violation, and it's in no way godly. It's vile and evil. Somebody's got to stop.
Yeah. Jill, thank you. Thank you for sharing your story with us. It's got to be, as you said, very difficult. And I wish for you healing. Thank you for the call. 18 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Back in 2018, Pastor Dave Barnhart of the St. Juania United Methodist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, delivered a sermon that is worth revisiting. He said, "The unborn are a convenient group of people to advocate for. They never make demands of you. They are morally uncomplicated, unlike the incarcerated, addicted, or the chronically poor. They don't resent your condescension or complain that you're not politically correct. Unlike widows, they don't ask you to question patriarchy. Unlike orphans, they don't need money, education, or childcare. Unlike aliens, they don't bring all that racial, cultural, and religious baggage that you dislike. They allow you to feel good about yourself without any work at creating or maintaining relationships. And when they're born, you can forget about them because they cease to be unborn. It's almost as if, by being born, they have died to you. You can love the unborn and advocate for them without substantially challenging your own wealth or power." The whole clip is over at ThomHartmann.com. Check it out. And welcome back. Picking up your calls here on Anything Goes for Friday the 13th. Jane in Malden, Missouri. Hey, Jane, what's on your mind today?
Hey, hello, Tom. I just wanted to tell you about a bill that's been passed in Missouri this past week to keep people from voting. And it includes a photo ID provision that to disenfranchised communities, and it would make it a crime to give someone an absentee ballot, calling it ballot harvesting. You can't take absentee ballots to older people like me. It would prevent someone from giving an application to a grandmother or friends in a nursing home, make it a crime to get paid to register voters or let volunteers help register more than 10 voters. It's just crazy. The crimes would be election felonies, would cause a person to never be allowed to vote again. And even an accusation of the violation by a campaign would entitle the Secretary of State to subpoena their records in detail and publicly report them as under investigation for election violation.
Wow.
The state of Missouri is just nuts.
Yeah.
It's just nuts.
Yeah. Well, now, and at the same time that is happening, let me tell you about what happened in Philadelphia. I was going to do this in the third hour, but this is, well, actually, I think I will wait. I'll leave that for the third hour. But these guys are busting stuff up left and right and doing things that I think are just very, very wrong. Jane, that's amazing. Jane, thank you for sharing that with us. That's grim. Judd in Mead Valley, Arizona. Hey, Judd, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, how you doing? It's
Good.
Mead View. I hate to change the subject about everything we're going through, but I'm 63 this year, and I've been listening to you talk about Medicare Advantage for a couple of years now, and I'm the truck driver. I'm out here on the highway.
Mm-hmm.
My brother's 3 years older than me, and he's I've been talking with him about it, trying to get him to listen to you and stuff, and I know that he and his wife are both on an Advantage plan,
mm-hmm.
and trying to make him understand. And he's saying, well, it's cheaper this way. It doesn't cost me as much.
Correct.
You'll see, and all this. And then the other thing he's trying to say is he doesn't understand how, how you say that you have to get if you're on Advantage, you have to get an okay for this and for that and for the other. And he says, no, that's not true. And he says, if you have to go to a independent company for a supplement, what's the difference?
Well, the difference is that the Medicare Advantage plans can deny you services. And in fact, this most recent study that came out from the federal government showed that
that's what I was trying to tell him.
1 in 4 times they deny services. Whereas Medicare, regular Medicare with a supplement, they can't do that. Judd, the best I can suggest, there's 2 articles that I've written about this that are both on the homepage at hartmannreport.com that you might want to share with your brother. Also, I wrote a book about it, and there's several chapters about this. It's the hidden history of American healthcare, and that's got all that information. So if you wanted to forward, send him a book or something for what it's worth. I'm not trying to sell them here.
But oh yeah, but I'll have to pick that one up. I haven't. One of your books, it was screwed, and I don't know if I gave it to someone or what I did with it, but. Yeah. That was back when I was living in Texas.
Yeah, no, this book on healthcare is pretty detailed and has all that information. So, Judd, I wish you the very best and thank you for the call. I can't do better than that. I think those 2 resources, those 2 articles in a book are the pretty solid stuff. Norma in Montgomery, Alabama. Hey, Norma, what's on your mind today?
Baby formula.
Yeah, go for it. This is another bizarre story here. Now we've got Republicans saying that how dare they feed baby formula to immigrant and refugee children. They should take it away from them and let them starve and ship it to retail stores in Michigan or something. Marjorie Taylor Greene is all over this.
Well, they're also blaming Biden, that it's his fault that those children are getting the formula where real American babies are starving.
Now, the problem is monopoly. You've got one company, Abbott Laboratories, that makes like a dozen different brands of baby formula. And when their factory got contaminated with bacteria that killed 2 babies, by the way, they had to shut down their production line, and that's where the shortage came from.
I know. And I'm wondering if this is to encourage women to nurse their children. And if you're a nursing mother, what are your chances of going back to work or finding a job where you would have maybe a daycare like they have in Europe where you could visit your child and nurse it when it's hungry? But here you're going to wind up with women being forced out of the workplace because they are nursing mothers, because they have been taught that formula is wrong or it's dangerous, it's not good for your baby. And so you're going to have fewer women working, which means that there will be less paid into Social Security, and so they can claim that Social Security is going broke because it doesn't have enough money. But I blame the contractors, the corporations that use contractors, and that way they do not have to match Social Security contributions. And most people don't even realize when they're a contract employee, a self-employed person, that they are losing out on the matching contribution. And so it's another way to impoverish America. But when you move women out of the workplace and they lose their skills or they fall behind in skills, it's harder for them to get another job. And you're going to find women who cannot go to work until all of their children are in school. And if you have somebody like that, the guy that's running, I don't remember where he's running from, but he said there's no reason to have a Department of Education, that a right to education is not in the Constitution.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing stuff. Norma, thank you. Thanks for highlighting that. I was going to do a rant about it, this is really a monopoly problem, and Americans should figure that out, that we shouldn't just have one company supplying that large a chunk of all the baby formula to the United States. And this applies to pretty much everything. Norma, thank you. It's 27 minutes past the hour. Back with more of your calls at Anything Goes Friday right after this.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We will be right back. Stick around. Occupying the media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, right here. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Hidden History of American Healthcare: Why Sickness Bankrupts You and Makes Others Insanely Rich by me. I wrote this book. This is from the introduction, the title, How a Single-Payer Healthcare Systems Help Stop COVID-19. Healthcare systems can be national security systems. Just ask anyone from Taiwan. From January 20th, 2020, on January 20, 2020, the United States recorded its first known case of COVID-19 infection. The following day, Taiwan got their first one, too. By the end of April, over 1 million Americans were infected with the virus. But Taiwan had recorded only 388 infections, and their last case of local transmission was on April 12th. A few had arrived on aircraft from other countries. All were contained by quarantine. As of this writing in September 2020, there hadn't been a single new case or a single death in Taiwan since April. The economy never shut down, and as of this writing, was projected to have grown nearly 2% in 2020. Business, restaurants, theaters, and sports events were all open. Life was back to normal, albeit a mask-wearing normal. And it was made possible by their national single-payer healthcare system and their citizens' willingness to do their bit for the collective good. Back in the 1980s, Taiwan was on the edge of moving toward a democracy after a military coup in the 1960s. And about 40% of Taiwanese families did not have health insurance. If somebody in a family got sick, the cost of care often wiped out that family, and demands for reform were loud across the nation. Yue Reinhardt was a German-born healthcare economist married to a Taiwanese woman, and he attended a conference on healthcare in Taipei in 1989. His presentation impressed representatives of the government in attendance, and while he was still in town for the conference, they asked him for his best suggestion for a national healthcare system. He and his wife went back to their hotel and discussed the issue in depth, finally deciding that a single-payer national system would be the most cost-effective, efficient, and comprehensive program possible. He shared his thoughts with the government representatives, and the next day he left Taiwan to go back to Princeton, where he was an economic professor. 6 months later, though, a representative of Taiwan's government called him to say that they were going to take up his suggestion and asked him to help craft their healthcare program. He enthusiastically agreed, and by 1995, Taiwan had instituted one of the world's best single-payer healthcare systems. Today, everybody in Taiwan is fully covered for doctor and hospital services. Everybody has a driver's license-like healthcare card, which accesses their entire medical history. They can book a doctor's appointment on any computer terminal in the country, and the entire cost of the system is a bit more than 6% of Taiwan's GDP. For comparison, in the United States, healthcare consumes 24% of our GDP because there is no insurance company intermediaries sucking profits off the system in Taiwan. When COVID-19 hit, Taiwan chose not to use the blunt force technique of shutting down their economy and locking people in. Instead, they took on the coronavirus with an aggressive nationwide test and contact trace program tied into the National Health Service database. Every infected person was identified and put into a comfortable quarantine, and every person he or she had come into contact with, even very marginal contacts, were also tested and their contacts traced. By April, just a bit more than 2 months after the first case surfaced, the country had the coronavirus isolated and completely under control. By quarantining inbound visitors to the nation island of 23 million, they were able, as of this writing, to keep it that way. Maintaining public health is one of the most important functions of any nation's healthcare system. Because America's is so fragmented, it's inconceivable that our nation could respond to an epidemic, a pandemic, or another public health disaster with the speed and elegance of Taiwan or any of the world's other nations with single-payer Medicare for all types of systems. It's like Stockholm Syndrome, a friend who's a psychotherapist said, describing the way that Americans have clung for more than 5 generations to a for-profit health insurance system, while the rest of the world figured out how to provide health care to all their citizens at a much lower price. People know it and have become familiar with it, she added. They just can't imagine anything else. It's probably the largest con job ever perpetrated on the American people, one that has cost trillions of dollars and millions of lives. It's been going on since the 1940s. If it were a scientific experiment, it would have been shut down by the ethics review panels generations ago. This experiment in providing health care via a for-profit insurance system has led to the deaths of more Americans than we lost in World War II. Every year, over 500,000 Americans go bankrupt, often losing everything they've worked their entire lives for because somebody in their family got sick. That's 500,000 families a year, every year, for the past few decades. And the coronavirus, of course, has only made things worse. Perhaps most galling, this massive ripoff is costing our entire nation and each of us individually a fortune. Insurance premiums right now make up 22% of all taxable payroll, well above what the cost of Medicare for all would be at around 14% when first put into place, dropping down to around 10% within a few years as previously uninsured people get their health needs up to date. As the health insurance, drug, and hospital parasites push their suckers deeper and deeper into our body politic, spending on health care by Americans went up 25% between 2000 and 2014. The book, The Hidden History of American Health Care by Thom Hartmann. Our 1-hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3-hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. The recent killing of a young black man in Michigan, Patrick Loyola, who was, the police officer was sitting on his back and put a gun right to the back of his head and shot him, is just the latest example of police killing people out of traffic stops, and predominantly black people. 28% of the people who are killed in traffic stops are black, but African Americans are only 13% of our population. Police in the United States have killed nearly 600 people during traffic stops since 2017. Mapping Police Violence is the nonprofit that's been doing the work on this. About 10% just this year, about 10% of the 1,100 people killed by police this year have been killed at traffic stops. Dante Wright, Sandra Bland, Philando Castile, we know their names and we know their stories, but we're not doing enough to get this under control. Other countries tend not to have this problem. We need to do something now. There's a video about it over at thomhartmann.com. Check it out. And welcome back, picking up your calls here on Anything Goes Friday. Hey, Corky, what's on your mind today?
Hello, Tom. Yeah, there's a lot of subjects, but the one I want to bring up, this is Friday, right?
Yeah.
It's Ron Paul, and he took off, and they were supposed to vote on that $39 billion package?
Yeah, Rand Paul blew it
Ukraine?
up. It's been moved to next week. So in fact, the president of Ukraine, or one of the, no, it was a Ukrainian government official was tweeting about it this morning about how the aid has been withheld because of Rand Paul.
Yeah, how many kids are going to die between now and then?
Too many. John McCain came out and said, Rand Paul works for Vladimir Putin. He said it right on the floor of the Senate. And apparently it was absolutely true.
Well, I got three things that really upset me. We got a crying kid on the Supreme Court when that guy was being...
You're talking about Beer Bong Brett?
He started crying.
Yeah.
Just a grown man with two kids.
Yeah.
I can understand something emotional, but because you're having to be asked hard questions,
right.
You're going to cry.
Yep.
And then we got the baby that was our last president. What did he? My brother just got to start to wake up and vote right. You got to vote these people out.
Yeah, that's really the only way to make it happen. Corky, spot on. Thank you very much, and thanks for pointing out what Rand Paul was up to. It's a crime against democracy, in my opinion. David in Santa Clarita. Hey, David, what's on your mind today?
The failure of the two-party system to deliver democracy, especially when it is financed by contributions which are not taxed. And I have a solution.
Okay.
In California, when they went to the jungle primary, they destroyed the third-party system. There are no third or fourth parties in California anymore, effectively. What we need to do is to go to ranked choice voting on all primaries and all elections.
I agree.
And put a 50% tax on all campaign contributions, which would, remember Eisenhower talked about the military-industrial complex. We now have a media political party complex, which is equally insidious.
Well, instead of putting a tax on campaign contributions, why don't we just go back to campaign contribution limits? We used to have a law that said that you couldn't do dark money, you couldn't contribute anonymously. The maximum an individual could contribute was $2,200. That law is still in effect for federal candidates, but there's 16 ways to get around it, and those all have evolved as a consequence of Citizens United, by and large. And a couple of other, smaller Supreme Court decisions. We just need to pass. And this was the For the People Act. If the For the People Act had been passed, it actually would have fixed all this stuff. But Manchin and Sinema blew it up. But I'm with you, David. I would love to see our elections cleaned up, and I would love to see a multi-party system in the United States. And because we have first past the post, winner take all elections, it is always going to tend toward a two-party system. But when you have ranked choice voting, you can have multiple parties, and it can work, and you're spot on. Thank you very much for that. Emmanuel in Dixon's Mill, Alabama. Hey, Emmanuel, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. The reason I'm calling is I was listening to your show, and one of your comments, one of your persons says we need to make another party, a progressive party, or this or that. What we need to do is become one-issue voters, and that is to get rid of the GOP once and for all. They're traitors. They're against democracy. And if we aren't careful, we will be in the same position as the German people were in 1932, when they allowed those people there to capture, as minorities, to capture that most progressive country in Europe at the time.
Well, it was the German equivalent of the Republican Party, that Hindenburg's party, that embraced Hitler because he had this very strong populist movement. He had a lot of followers. It wasn't enough to get him, into office, but he had a lot of followers, almost a third of the country. And so they thought, well, we'll bring him into the party and we'll be able to control him. And so they brought Hitler into the party and made him chancellor, thinking that would calm him down and he would have his needs met. And instead, he turned out to be Adolf Hitler. And frankly, I think the same thing happened with the Republican Party and Trump. The question is whether the Republican Party is ever going to recover from this.
No, they're not going to recover. They were heading that way anyway.
Yeah, good point.
They were looking for a reason to do what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is not just brand new with Trump. Trump just happened to be the accelerant that pushed them farther to the where they want to go anyway. The Republican Party has ceased to being a democratic thinking people. All they want to do now is to control everything, get the money, get their commissions from the corporations, and serve them. They have no interest in serving the American people. So we have to do one thing this time. That is to become one-issue voters. That issue is to be the election to diminish the Republican Party. If something else grows out of that, fine. But in the meantime, it needs to be crushed electorally, not by any kind of nonsense or violence, but by electorally, it needs to be crushed once and for all. Because if we don't do that, it's going to linger. That thing has lingered since 1865. From the Civil War, it's been lingering and slow burning till it got to where they conquered us, tried to conquer our capital back on 1/6. And now we got people who get a subpoena, and they don't even have to go in. You imagine if you get a traffic ticket, or anybody who listens to this show, get a traffic ticket or a subpoena and don't show up, and see how quickly our butts would be in a jail cell.
Yeah.
We need to, huh?
No, I was just going to comment, but finish your thought and then I'll rant.
I'm just saying that we need to step up and quit being so easy on people who are absolutely hate America in terms of democracy.
Yeah.
As you said earlier, the more democracy we have, the better.
Yeah, amen. Emmanuel, and I agree with absolutely everything you said with one just little tiny tweak, which is that in 1865, the Republican Party was actually a pretty good party. The problem came in 1876 when they cut a deal with the racist Democrats at that time to end Reconstruction. And that was the Hayes-Tilden election of 1876. That was the end of Reconstruction. The Republican Party has been corrupt since then.
Okay, to just comment on that. See, that was the compromise there. That's all the label. We're so far beyond that now.
I'm with you.
Because we all know that in 1965, the Dixiecrats fled the Democratic Party because African Americans or black people were entering that party because of the Kennedy and what Johnson did.
Yep.
And then in 1980, when Ronald Reagan, he locked it all up when he went to Neshoba County, Mississippi. That's where Goodman, Cheney, and Warner were murdered.
Yep.
And he went to that county, and that's where he announced his run for president, and that's when they all went into the Republican Party. We need to wash those people on out and go on to the democracy, go on to the future, because we're going to be an interracial, we're going to be a democracy, and we're going to be a free and open society, whether they want to or not. That's the mission.
Amen. Emmanuel,
thank you so very much for listening to me.
You're welcome. Brilliant rant. Thank you, Emmanuel. Lee in Sepulveda, California. Hey, Lee, what's on your mind today?
What's on my mind is everything that everybody is just saying and you poo-poo a third party.
I don't poo-poo third parties. I think third parties are great. The problem is seizing power via a third party is damn near impossible in the United States.
Okay, so let's make this platform, because the Republicans got 74 million votes with no platform. That is ludicrous. That is lunacy.
Yeah.
So
they had a platform. It was "We Love Donald Trump." Heil Trump.
Yeah, that's no platform. That's the guy can lie and get away with it.
Yep.
But if our platform has four bottom lines, the one is kids not being killed by bullets. 45,000 went in 2020. That's horrid. Also, violence against females, like that caller that called in 70 years later, still at the effect of it. The other thing is that it is reproductive rights. Any adult, no government official can say anything about that. That eliminates the Supreme Court, period, their decision. And the fourth thing is Green Party. so that we have the environment safe. Those are the 4 issues for our new party. Would you join it?
Yeah, well, I would like to take over the Democratic Party, frankly, because it's there and it's a whole lot easier than starting.
The Democratic Party would be included, and so would the Republican Party. There are progressive Republicans and progressive Democrats.
Okay.
They would be included.
All right. Lee, thank you. It's 45 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Idealists, welcome. We'll be picking up your phone calls on the other side of this break. Stick around. And welcome back. Lee in Lincoln City, Oregon. Hey, Lee, what's on your mind today?
Hey, how you doing, Tom? I really like your program. I just wish that you were more up on prime time so more people could hear what's going on. And
we're doing pretty good. So what's on your mind?
No, I know you are. I know you do. Okay, well, your baloney guy yesterday kind of got me thinking. Well, it didn't get me thinking. It's I've been thinking this for a while. Is that, and he sounded like a young guy, and all young people anymore, it seems like they get all their news on the internet. And we both know that the internet is a mess as far as misinformation. And I mean, there's some great things you can do on it, but it's my opinion that without the internet, we would have a whole lot less problems right now. And
yeah, I mean, it does help a lot and solves a lot, but I don't think the problem is so much the internet per se, it's social media, because they're being run by algorithms that push stories at you or push people ranting at you that are the most inflammatory. It all runs on the theory, if it bleeds, it leads. If it's sensational and emotional, it's going to get pushed out. And the right wing has figured out how to exploit that.
No, I totally understand that. It's just that, it's a platform that, like you and I, happy belated birthday, by the way. I just had my 73rd last month.
Hey, thank you.
So we're both part of the American graffiti generation. But back in our day, we didn't have these platforms. I mean, it was all kind of, we didn't have it. So, but all I'm saying is the internet is giving people the opportunity to do and say whatever they want, whether it's true or not. And we know that's going on. I just wish there was some way to make people accountable, which people don't seem to be accountable for anything anymore.
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
It's crazy. I mean, it's just, the world is, you had a caller the other day said, I'm glad I'm old. And I said, you know what? So am I. Yeah. Because it's going to go to hell here, I think, if we don't get something squared away with people and environment and everything else. I don't want to be around here when some little kid comes up to his daddy and says, Daddy, did these really exist? And he shows him a picture of a bear or a chipmunk or something when there's nothing left in this world except a bunch of, power-hungry, greedy people.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not quite that pessimistically. I really think there's still hope for the human race. I still think there's hope for America, and I still think that we can stop our environmental destruction. But, we have gone so far, and so much damage has been done so far that, so many people don't even recognize.
I hope so, too. And it's, I think there's some things we could do. I wish everybody was paying the same percentage of tax.
Why?
Whether you're working at McDonald's or whether you're, sending ships into space, you should all be paying the same percentage.
Why should somebody who's living in poverty be paying income taxes?
Oh, well, that too. Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, if you're in a poverty stage, they shouldn't be paying. But
so what you're saying is that the billionaires who are paying 3% taxes right now should be paying the 20 or 30% tax that the rest of us pay.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. We're all supposed to be equal in this world, according to the Constitution. So, let's make it that way. Yeah. But
that was the Declaration.
I don't know. It's all we can do is hope. I mean, I know one thing that would help would be if somebody would put a bunch of Big Macs in Donald Trump's pockets and send him out into bear country and tie him to a tree.
Okay, Lee, I'll leave it at that. I would not wish harm on our former president. I absolutely would not. Lee, thank you for the call. We'll be back. It's 10 minutes before the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program, picking up your calls right after this on Anything Goes Friday the 13th.
Hey, I've got a new book out. It's called The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy. Available wherever you find fine books. I don't know if you caught this, but there was a piece of legislation before the House of Representatives that explicitly required the U.S. State Department to preserve any evidence of war crimes committed by the Russian forces in Ukraine, to gather reports of it, to preserve it, presumably in anticipation of some sort of a war crimes prosecution. And for reasons I can't quite figure out, maybe you have an idea, 6 Republicans voted against this. No, we don't want the war crimes of the Putin administration to be. Thomas Massey from Kentucky, Scott Perry from Pennsylvania, Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia, Warren Davidson from Ohio, Andy Biggs from Arizona, and Paul Gosar from Arizona. I'm scratching my head here. Why would these 6 Republican politicians not want us to preserve the war crimes evidence? There's a video about this that you can see over at thomhartmann.com. Picking up your calls here on Anything Goes Friday. Luigi in Pensacola, Florida. Hey, Luigi, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Thank you for taking my call as usual. I just want to regress a little, go back a little bit. Some of the stuff I read the other day that you posted, which I read every day, on the Mayberry versus Madison.
Marbury, yeah.
Marbury. I always have trouble with that name. I don't know why. Anyway, it was John Marshall who failed to deliver Marbury's commission. Marbury was given a commission in a midnight purge. John Adams appointed all these conservative judges from the Federalist Society, which was back then very active. And Marshall was the Secretary of State, and he was going to take over as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court within a day or two, and he failed to deliver that commission.
That's correct. It was not the Federalist Society, though. It was the Federalist Party, but and they were the first major political party in the United States. But you're absolutely right. So far on the history lesson, Luigi.
Yeah, and when it came to the court, I got a bad cold today. Marbury was Justice Marshall asked himself 3 questions about this. Was Marbury entitled to his commission? And if so, did the law afford him a remedy? Yes, said Marshall. But he knew he was going to run into a lot of trouble with Jefferson, and he thought the court might be humiliated if Jefferson told him to go pound sand. So he asked himself a 3rd question. The 3rd question was the remedy for this, for Marbury's right of mandamus issued by the Supreme Court? No, said Marshall, because the Supreme Court could not issue such writs because Section 13 of the 1789 Judiciary Act of 1789.
Right, which he overturned with that decision.
Yes, sir. And this was the basis for, I've read 2 chapters in this book, Law and Independent Judiciary and the Origins of Judicial Review. I mean, it's amazing what he did, how he just grabbed that power toward the Supreme Court. And I hope I'm on the right thing, but I think I am.
Oh, you absolutely are. There are several chapters about this in my book on the Supreme Court, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court, The Betrayal of America. And your history is 100% correct. And basically what John Marshall, as the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, did was overturned a section of the Judiciary Act, which was put into place to establish the court system. The Constitution merely authorizes Congress to create the court system, which they did with the Judiciary Act. And that part of the Judiciary Act required that the commissions be hand-delivered, physically delivered to the people who got the positions. And Marbury had been nominated for that position by John Adams, but the commission had never been physically delivered to him. And the Chief Justice, John Marshall, said, okay, that part of the Judiciary Act is unconstitutional. And so he struck down a law that had been passed by Congress and signed by President Adams. And at that point, Thomas Jefferson went nuts. And he said, wait a minute, the Supreme Court should not have the power to strike down a law passed by Congress and signed by the President. Nowhere in the Constitution does it give the Supreme Court that power. Under this understanding of the Constitution, it has become a mere thing of wax in the hands of the judiciary. That's a verbatim quote. He went on to say that this was judicial tyranny. I mean, he ranted about this at length. And that's why the next time that the Supreme Court
and struck down a law that had been passed by the House and Senate and signed by the president was 1856 in Dred Scott. I mean, that's how long the Supreme Court was like, they got their fingers burned so badly by the Marbury decision that for literally 50 years, they didn't do it again. And then, but now it's all they do. I mean, it's just amazing. Exactly. It's become completely normalized. And, you know, people go on the court, it's our job to oversee the lawmaking process. We ride herd on Congress. It's nowhere in the Constitution. It's literally nowhere in the Constitution. On the other hand, there's such a good debate around this, Luigi, because and I wrote a piece about this yesterday or the day before.
The day before.
That laid this stuff out. And the problem is, if you end judicial review and you have a Congress that's controlled by Republicans and a president like Donald Trump, they could pass laws that are just obviously, blatantly unconstitutional. And there would be no Supreme Court to stop them if you've ended judicial review. On the other hand, with judicial review, I can give you 100 examples, they're all in my book, on times when the Supreme Court brought us undemocratic outcomes, damaged our democracy, did harm to the United States using judicial review over the loud objections of Congress and the president. So it's like, you're burned one way and you're beat up the other way. I mean, it's like I don't have an answer for this, but I do think that this issue of judicial review does need to become a part of the conversation, the mainstream conversation in America, particularly now that we've got 5 crackpots, 6 conservatives on the court. Luigi, I got to run, but thank you for the call and for the history lesson. We'll be right back. It's Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Amazing stuff. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, how the death of privacy and the rise of surveillance threaten us and our democracy, by Thom Hartmann. More information at all book outlets. Wild Alaskan Company, 100% sustainable wild-caught seafood delivered right to your door. More info at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. Cozy Earth, better sleep, better you. More info at cozyearth.com, promo code TOM. The latest views and opinions from U.S. politics and other fascinating subjects too, including cutting-edge science reports at HartmanReport.com. And Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at Dinovite.com.
Retake my back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Under the Influence, Putting Peer Pressure to Work by Robert H. Frank. And I'm reading from the prologue. That we are more closely connected to one another than most of us realize is an old idea. An important variation dates from 1929, when Hungarian writer Frigyes Karinthy published a short story entitled Chains. Two of the story's main characters speculate that any two living people can be connected by a chain involving no more than 5 acquaintances. That some such chains exist is hardly surprising, since most of us can think of people in distant locations to whom we're connected through a small number of intermediaries.
The man bites dog aspect of Corinthi's conjecture is that almost any two people, A and E, could be linked by a chain like A knows B, B knows C, C knows D, who knows E. One of the first systematic attempts to test this claim came in the 1960s with a series of experiments by the psychologist Stanley Milgram. In it, he sent packages containing a small booklet to 96 people chosen at random from the Omaha, Nebraska telephone directory. His cover letter asked them to try to forward the booklet to a specific residence of Boston, Massachusetts, through a chain of personal acquaintances. He told them the name and address of the Boston resident, that he worked as a stockbroker, and that the first person in their chain should be somebody they knew on a first-name basis. Milgram also advised them to choose someone they believed, presumably based on the target's location and occupation, could be socially closer to the target than they were themselves. Subsequent recipients in the chain were asked to forward the same instructions. Many of the Omaha recipients undoubtedly tossed Milgram's booklet in the trash, so it's remarkable that the Boston target received 18 of the 96 packages. The average number of links in the 18 chains was 5.9. But the now familiar expression 6 degrees of separation would not gain broad currency until many years later, when John Guare's play by that name premiered on Broadway in 1990. The concept became a meme in full when 4 Albright College students introduced 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon in 1994, a game designed to measure the professional proximity of an actor, living or dead, to the American film star Kevin Bacon. An actor has a Bacon number of 1, for example, if he or she appeared in the same film with Bacon. Someone who appeared in a film with another actor who appeared in a film with Bacon has a Bacon number of 2, and so on. The average Bacon number is 2.95 among actors who have one. In that group, even the actor most distant from Bacon, William Rufus Shafter, has a Bacon number of only 7. Shafter, a Union Army officer during the Civil War, appeared in 2 films in 1898. For academics who study social connectedness, the 6 degrees concept gained little traction until 1998. That's when the sociologist Duncan Watts and the mathematician Steve Straga published their landmark paper, Collective Dynamics of Small World Networks in Nature. In the years since then, this paper has provided the mathematical foundation for the analytical tools that social scientists have been using with such remarkable success to study how ideas and behaviors spread through populations like infectious diseases. It has already been cited by other scholars more than 38,000 times and is one of the few papers ever published to be among the most widely cited works in multiple disciplines. In his 1976 book, The Selfish Gene, the evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins coined the term meme, which Webster now defines as an idea, behavior, style, or usage that spreads from person to person within a culture. The meme is to cultural transmission, Dawkins argued, as the gene is to biological transmission. One of Charles Darwin's central insights was that natural selection favors genetic variations that enhance the individual organism's ability to survive and reproduce. Much of the time, the same variations also benefit larger groups, but often not. For example, an inclination to cheat when no one's looking might benefit individuals, but widespread cheating almost always makes matters worse for groups. It is the same with memes. The memes that propagate most successfully are often ones that benefit both individuals and groups. But here too, not always. As the legal scholar Jeffrey Stake has argued, ideas should not be treated as inert products, but as living things that sometimes exert some influence over their environment. Some of the ideas are more adept at surviving than others, and the ones that survive will not necessarily be good for humans. It is often hard to evaluate whether a specific behavior even qualifies as a meme, and if so, whether its consequences on balance are positive or negative. Yet sometimes the evidence is clear. We know, for example, that the strongest predictor of whether people will take up smoking is the proportion of their close friends who smoke. Smoking is thus clearly a meme. The negative health consequences of smoking are also conclusively documented, and most smokers themselves express regret over having started. By definition, then, smoking unambiguously qualifies as a socially destructive meme. On the other side of the ledger, we have compelling evidence that the adoption of photovoltaic solar panels is both socially contagious and almost uniformly positive in terms of environmental consequences. Accordingly, few would object to calling the practice a socially beneficial meme. Adam Smith, widely considered the father of economics, is often cited in defense of the claim that competitive markets produce the greatest good for the greatest number. The book is Under the Influence by Robert H. Frank.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the third hour of our program. It's Anything Goes Friday. Just a couple of quick stories I wanted to share with you. Republicans are criticizing the Biden administration Thursday about this infant food shortage. They're not pointing out that when Reagan suspended enforcement of the Sherman Antitrust Act in 1983, and no president has reinstated it, that we went through a 20-year period of massive mergers and acquisitions. So we ended up with one company, Abbott Laboratories, making a good chunk of all the baby food in America under about a dozen different brand names. And then when their factory got contaminated with bacteria that has now killed 2 babies, they had to shut down production, and guess what? We're out of baby food. And the Republicans are saying the reason for this problem is that we're feeding refugee children baby food. Honest to God, I'm not making this up. This is Marjorie Taylor Greene just tweeted, the Biden administration has been sending pallets of baby formula for illegal mothers and their babies while American mothers and babies cannot find baby formula. This is completely unacceptable, and this needs to end now. See, I'm not making this up. I mean, here's another one. This is Troy Nehls, N-E-H-L-S, a Republican from Texas, on Twitter. Baby formula should go to Americans before illegals. This should not have to be said. And, of course, Greg Abbott, the one of the most bizarre politicians in America. I don't know how else to say it. The governor of Texas. He accused the administration of, quote, giving critical supplies to illegal immigrants before the very people who Joe Biden took an oath to serve. Right. None of these people are offering actual solutions. None of them. I mean, the obvious actual solution is to start breaking up some of these giant corporate monopolies, but no, they don't want to have anything to do with that. After all, it's the corporate monopolies that are paying their bills, that are sending them to 5-star resorts, that are giving them $1 million a year jobs after they leave Congress, that are hiring their kids and their relatives. I mean, come on. Okay, number one. And number two, I wanted to share with you this mind-boggling story about what's going on in Philadelphia. These 2 Republicans, Seamus O'Donnell, 27, and C.J. Parker, 24 years old, have been fired by the Republican Party. Now, I guarantee you, if they were Democrats, they'd be in prison right now, or at least in jail. But they were fired, and what were they fired for? Well, it sure looks like they were, along with Lawrence Tabas, a state party chair, Republican Party chair, they were going around to voters and changing their voter registration address to a post office box that the county Republican Party has, so that the county Republican Party could vote these absentee ballots. And they weren't even telling most of these people that they were requesting absentee ballots in their names. This is Rebecca Sager is writing about this over at Daily Kos. The headline, GOP officials in Philadelphia ousted after ballot harvesting scheme uncovered. Many of the voters whose ballots, this is according to the Philadelphia Inquirer, the newspaper in Philadelphia. Many of the voters whose ballots were misdirected told the Inquirer they never applied to vote by mail. Although dozens of Republican ballots for the May 17 primary had been redirected to the post office box registered to the Republican Registration Coalition. 1 out of every 6 Republican ballot applications from the ward where O'Donnell and Parker worked was listed as that post office box. This is not voter fraud. This is election fraud. Penn Live reports that the chairman of the Republican Registration Coalition and a one-time Republican ward leader, Billy Lanziotti, 23, helped voters fill out ballot applications and put his own P.O. box address on the forms where voters should have put their own home addresses. Lanziotti claimed to Penn Live that this was, quote, a service to voters. How would you like to be served by the Republican Party? They will help you out. They will put their address on your absentee ballot so they can fill out your ballot for you and mail it in. Isn't that sweet of the Republicans? He claims he filled out the forms, back to this article here, he claims he filled out the forms with his P.O. box so that later they could be delivered to voters by someone he trusted. I'm not making this up. Honest to goodness, this is what he said. He said, quote, there's been a number of problems with the post office lately. Right. Well, let's take that up with Mr. DeJoy. Amazing. I mean, it's amazing, in fact, is not a strong enough word. I think this is even worse. And then on top of that, now we've got this story that Reuters is reporting that Erdogan, the president of Turkey, the strongman leader of Turkey is a member of NATO. It's not a member of the EU, but they are a member of NATO. And NATO, like the European Union and like the United Nations, operates by consensus. It's not majority rule. It's 100%. You have to have 100%. Everybody has to vote for something or it doesn't happen. And so Erdogan just came out this morning and said that he is not going to sign off on giving Sweden and Finland membership in NATO. Erdogan, of course, has been getting closer and closer and closer to Putin for the last few years. He's no longer running a democracy in Turkey. It's a dictatorship now. And has been ever since there was an attempted coup against him, and he just clamped down, and that was the end of democracy in Turkey. NATO has been around for 70 years, and if Turkey continues to say no, NATO's going to have basically two choices. They could either kick out Turkey and then vote to allow Sweden and Finland in, or they can just say to Sweden and Finland, sorry, guys. Meanwhile, Russia just announced that as of midnight tomorrow night, they are cutting, or 1 a.m. tomorrow night, they are cutting off all their electricity to Finland. Russia supplies about 10% of Finland's electricity. So, this is getting hardcore, shall we say. So here we have authoritarians loving authoritarians, Erdogan and Putin. And I think that's why he won't support Finland and Sweden. He's saying the reason that Erdogan is giving for saying that he will not vote to allow Sweden and Finland to join in NATO is that those countries both have too many Nazis. Sound familiar? This was Putin's excuse for invading Ukraine, you'll recall. There's too many Nazis. Hey, Erdogan, you want to see some Nazis? Come to the United States. I can introduce you to a few. This is just Erdogan sucking up to Putin. Just like Rand Paul yesterday stalled the United States Senate and refused to allow the Senate. One senator can do this. Refused to allow the United States Senate to vote on a $30 or $40 billion aid package to Ukraine that passed the House a couple days ago. It was supposed to pass the Senate yesterday, and those weapons were supposed to be on their way to the fighters in Ukraine today. They are not. The fighters in Ukraine do not have access to these American weapons today because of Rand Paul. Rand Paul, the guy that John McCain said works for Putin. So Erdogan, Rand Paul, 147, I believe it is, Republicans in the House and Senate who voted not to certify the election of Joe Biden. You've got a couple dozen Republicans now who are consistently in the House of Representatives voting not to send any aid to Ukraine because they are, along with Donald Trump. Donald Trump refuses to condemn Russia for this. They're just all in for Putin.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Authoritarians love authoritarians, whether it's Erdogan loving Putin or whether it's Rand Paul loving Putin. It's all the same thing.
And welcome back. Amy in Pico Rivera, California. Hey, Amy, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I don't know if you've heard about this woman or not. Her name is Jean Schmidt, I believe her name is. She's a state representative in Ohio. She is claiming that there should be no exception in abortion to incest and rape because the victims of incest and rape are already traumatized. So it won't hurt anything if they're traumatized a little more by having a baby.
Right. Yeah, I'm familiar with it. In fact, I reported it 3 or 4 days ago. She said that.
Oh, did you? Okay, yeah. It's just it's unbelievable, and I just wanted to tell everybody. I think another caller said this too. There's going to be marches all over the place on the 14th tomorrow. I'm going to the one at L.A. City Hall, and we all need to come out and show our voices. It's probably not going to do any good, but we have to show up. We have to fight until we can't fight anymore.
Yeah, every little bit helps. It is just so true. Every little bit helps. Amy, thank you.
Yes.
Thanks for the call, and good luck. And give us a call next week and let us know how it went. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good talking with you. Lowell in Salem, Oregon. Hey, Lowell, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I wanted to let you know that the New York Times reported last week that 2 Texas Dallas officers were charged with firing those smoke grenades into people's faces and blinded one person. And blindings occurred across the nation, especially in Minneapolis.
Was this during the George Floyd protests, you mean?
Yes. But our problem is the police are increasingly acting like an occupying army in this country. And they're being trained, as Amnesty International showed, by
actual
Israeli,
Nazis.
Trainers.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
No, by Israeli trainers.
Okay.
And the problem is being an occupying force leads to additional cruelty like this, where they intentionally fire these 40 millimeter smoke grenades into people's faces.
Yeah, I don't know, but I know that there's a kid here in Portland. His name is Donovan. I'm forgetting his last name, who was hit in the forehead with one of these things, and he's now permanently brain damaged. I mean, his life is gone, and he was a kid. I mean, he was like 20. And
we need to change police training and explicitly ban this type of activity.
I agree, and I think that Hollywood needs to get the message too. Louise and I have been watching this FBI series, on TV. Every night for an hour we watch something that's kind of brain dead entertainment. And these guys are using no-knock warrants every single time they go looking for anybody for anything. I mean, they're just blatantly violating the Constitution left and right. And I'm yelling at my TV, like, you can't do that. You've got to go to a judge, or you've got to announce your presence. This is, and I remember with the same thing when we watched the new version of Hawaii Five-0, and the guy brings people into the basement of the police station in Honolulu and shoots a guy in the knee to get him to confess. And I'm like, how is this? How are we? Because this is training American police, right? And it's causing Americans to think, oh, well, that's normal. And it's not normal. I'm with you, Lowell. I'm with you. Thank you very much. There was also a piece a couple days ago about how some Nazis were training police as well. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. Have you noticed that people are basically imitating Donald Trump all over the country? We're seeing all this rude behavior, sexist, racist behavior, people getting arrested at airport gates, airplanes being turned around because people are fighting with flight attendants, disorderly, rude, unhinged conduct. I mean, it's just gone nuts. Car crashes are up, gun deaths are up, shootings are up. Healthcare workers are being literally physically assaulted in some hospitals. They're having to put together panic buttons. This kind of behavior in our schools is increasing. It looks like, according to some sociologists, psychologists, and even business consultants, it looks like a lot of this ties back not just to the Trump presidency, with Donald Trump providing us with an example of how to be, an obnoxious person, but also the crisis of the pandemic. We've got a deeper dive into this topic over at thomhartmann.com. There's a great video about it. You can check it out there. "20 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Alan in Houston, Texas. Hey, Alan, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Thank you. What I'd like to talk about is the Palestinian American journalist who was shot by Israel in Palestine a couple of days ago. Her name is Shireen Abu Akleh. And this is not a one-time thing. This is part of a long history of Israel suppressing the truth from coming out, the truth about the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories. Other examples of this are Rachel Corrie, who was trying to protect Palestinian homes from demolition. She was wearing a bright red safety vest. She was speaking with a bulldoze driver, and he literally bulldozed her to death.
Yes, I remember.
There's yes, sir, of course. There's Dave Miller, the Welsh-British documentary film producer. He was wearing a press bulletproof jacket with the word press, clearly written on it, and a helmet similar to Shireen Abu Akleh, and he was shot by an expert Israeli sniper in the neck between his vest and his helmet, just like Shireen Abu Akleh was. And then all the way back to the 40s, Folk Bernadotte, he wasn't a journalist. He was a UN representative trying to, negotiate peace in Palestine way back in the 40s. And they killed him. They blew up, the Israelis also blew up the King David Hotel to try to
That was Menachem Begin. That's how they. That was how they began the process of getting an Israeli state. Alan, I get what you're saying, and I think this most recent killing is particularly egregious and outrageous. And what blows my mind is that it is not being investigated by an independent agency. That the UN isn't in there looking at it, or one of the organizations that protect journalists, or some international police agency. The country that is charged with committing the crime is doing the investigation. And I have a problem with that.
I'd like to offer that what is important for us as Americans, we're not going to solve this.
No.
But what is important for us as Americans is to realize that we are responsible for this. Unconditional, tremendous amounts of military aid, economic aid, political aid, unconditional. I mean, for example, the U.S. says we oppose settlements on Palestinian territories. This is illegal under international law, and we say we oppose those settlements. No, we don't. You can't say we oppose settlements and then pay for them and protect them and support them in every way possible. Yeah. And so what's important for us is morally, maybe speak out, maybe call our representatives, get to know the truth. There's organizations, ifamericans.knew.org. There's Americans for Middle East Understanding. So some of this truth can get out. We're not just relying on free networks anymore.
No, I got it. The danger here, Alan, is that there is a whole organized cadre of anti-Semites, Nazis, and basically Jew haters.
This is nothing against Jews.
No, let me finish my sentence. Who use incidents like this, who try to hijack incidents like this to basically challenge even the legitimacy of the Israeli state. And
I understand.
And so we have to be very, very clear that we are calling for the rule of law. We are calling for democratic institutions here.
If I may, I'd like to point out that there are some of the most vocal, strongest supporters of Palestinian rights are Jewish organizations. Yes. Jews for for Peace, Jewish Americans for Peace, Beit Tselem,
JStreet.org.
J Street, Peace Now. So this has nothing against Jews, and even if there are no Jews supporting Palestinian rights, this has nothing to do with Jews. This has to do with the Zionist regime in Israel. And would you allow me just 10 seconds to say something about our own elections coming up?
Sure.
Number one, why is it that Republicans seem to think that the right to life ends when you are outside the womb? That's number one. Number two is, I don't know if we can emphasize strongly enough, what Mr. Trump is up to right now. He is literally working and plotting to overthrow the next election, putting the pawns in place, putting the chips in place, the secretaries of state. I know you've spoken about it at infinitum.
No, you're absolutely right, Alan.
We can go out there and yell it out.
Well, I think people are
overturn democracy in this country. He's going to turn us into an autocratic state.
I know.
And if he gets in for a second term, he's learned his lesson.
And by the way, it's not just Trump. If he, because I think Ron DeSantis will do the same thing. And there's a piece by Rich Lowry in the New York Times today sanitizing Ron DeSantis, which I found particularly horrific. Now, in answer to your first question, which I'm assuming was not rhetorical, the reason why all of these, so-called pro-life people, particularly the ones who are quite wealthy and represent right-wing causes, organizations in the Republican Party, the reason why their care for life ends at the moment of birth is because at the moment of birth is when the real expenses begin. And they don't want to have their taxes go up to pay for public education, for preschool, for health care for babies. I mean, they don't want to have any responsibility for any of that. But as long as that baby is inside, a woman or the fetus, zygote, whatever stage of development it may be, as long as it's there, they're able to avoid the costs.
Or speaking out for the right of everyone's right to life, regardless of race or ethnic background.
Amen. Alan, I got to run, but thank you. It's an excellent point.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome, and thanks for listening to KPFT. We'll be back in just a moment. It is Anything Goes Friday the 13th edition. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a second. Stick around. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, fair and only slightly unbalanced.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Looks like Elon Musk's bid to buy Twitter is on hold, and meanwhile, his Tesla stock is in the tank right now, so maybe he can't even do it. Today, we're reading from Elon Papp's book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. This is from the preface. It's titled The Red House. The Red House was a typical early Tel Avivian building, the pride of the Jewish builders and craftsmen who toiled over it in the 1920s. It had been designed to house the head office of the local Workers' Council. It remained such until toward the end of 1947, it became the headquarters of the Haganah, the main Zionist underground militia in Palestine. Located near the sea on Yarkon Street in the northern part of Tel Aviv, the building formed another fine addition to the first Hebrew city on the Mediterranean, the White City, as its literati and pundits affectionately called it. For in those days, unlike today, the immaculate whiteness of his houses still bathed the town as a whole in the opulent brightness so typical of Mediterranean port cities of that era and that region. It was a sight for sore eyes, elegantly fusing Bauhaus motifs with native Palestinian architecture in an admixture that was called Levantine in the least derogatory sense of the term. Such too was the Red House, its simple rectangular features graced with frontal arches that framed the entrance and supported the balconies of its two upper stories. It was either its association with the workers' movement that had inspired the adjective red, or its pinkish tinge that it acquired during sunset that had given the house its name. The former was more fitting as the building continued to be associated with the Zionist version of socialism when, in the 1970s, it became the main office for Israel's kibbutzim movement. Houses like this, important historical remnants of the mandatory period, prompted UNESCO in 2003 to designate Tel Aviv as a World Heritage Site. Today, the house is no longer there, a victim of development, which has razed this architectural relic to the ground to make room for a car park next to the new Sheraton Hotel. Thus, in this street, too, no traces left of the White City, which it has slowly transmogrified into the sprawling, polluted, extravagant metropolis that is the modern Tel Aviv. In this building on a cold Wednesday afternoon, 10 March 1948, a group of 11 men, veteran Zionist leaders, together with young military Jewish officers, put the final touches on a plan for the ethnic cleansing of Palestine.
That same evening, military orders were dispatched to the units on the ground to prepare for the systematic expulsion of Palestinians from vast areas of the country. The orders came from a detailed description of the methods to be employed to forcibly evict the people: large-scale intimidation, laying siege to and bombarding villages and population centers, setting fire to homes, properties, goods, expulsion, demolition, and finally planting mines among the rubble to prevent any of the expelled inhabitants from returning. Each unit was issued with its own list of villages and neighborhoods as the targets of the master plan. Codenamed Plan D, Dalet in Hebrew, this was the fourth and final version of less substantial plans that outlined the fate the Zionists had in store for Palestine and consequently for its native population. The previous three schemes had articulated only obscurely how the Zionist leadership contemplated dealing with the presence of so many Palestinians living in the land that the Jewish national movement coveted as its own. This fourth and last blueprint spelled it out clearly and unambiguously. Quote, "The Palestinians have to go," end quote. In the words of one of the first historians to note the significance of that plan, Simcha Flapan, the military campaign against the Arabs, including the conquest and destruction of the rural areas, was set forth in the Haganah's Plan Dalet. The aim for the plan was in fact the destruction of both the rural and urban areas of Palestine. As the first chapters of this book will attempt to show, this plan was both the inevitable product of the Zionist ideological impulse to have an exclusively Jewish presence in Palestine, and a response to developments on the ground once the British cabinet had decided to end the mandate. Clashes with local Palestinian militias provided the perfect context and pretext for implementing the ideological vision of an ethnically cleansed Palestine. The Zionist policy was first based on retaliation against Palestinian attacks in February of 1947, and it transformed into an initiative to ethnically cleanse the country as a whole in March of 1948. Once the decision was taken, it took 6 months to complete the mission. When it was over, more than half of Palestine's native population, close to 800,000 people, had been uprooted. 531 villages had been destroyed, and 11 urban neighborhoods had been emptied of their inhabitants. The plan decided upon on 10 March 1948, and above all its systematic implementation in the following months, was a clear-cut case of ethnic cleansing operation regarded under international law today as a crime against humanity. After the Holocaust, it has become impossible to conceal large-scale crimes against humanity. Our modern communication-driven world, especially since the upsurge of electronic media, no longer allows human-made catastrophes to remain hidden from the public eye or to be denied. And yet one such crime has been erased almost totally from the global public memory: the disposition of the Palestinians in 1948 by Israel. This, the most formative element in the modern history of the land of Palestine, has ever since been systematically denied and is still today not recognized as an historical fact, let alone acknowledged as a crime that needs to be confronted politically as well as morally. Ethnic cleansing is a crime against humanity, and the people who perpetrate it today are considered criminals to be brought before special tribunals. It may be difficult to decide how one ought to refer to or deal with in the legal sphere those who initiated and perpetrated ethnic cleansing in Palestine in 1948. But it's impossible to reconstruct their crimes. Anyhow, it continues the ethnic cleansing of Palestine.
Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. The New York Times has put together just an amazing graphic where they took all the record temperatures from last year, from 2021, and put the red ones being hot and blue ones being cold, put them as little dots on a map of the United States. And it sure looks to me like what we're seeing is the collapse of the jet stream. If you watch weather shows on TV and things like that, what you see is, some very odd. Well, we saw this, for example, with that cold snap last a year ago, February, where the jet stream just kind of drooled all the way down, carried Arctic air all the way down into, southern Texas and northern Mexico, froze Texas up, shut down their power systems and things like that. And it's blocking the movement of air here in the Pacific Northwest, and thus we're getting these massive heat waves. I think that we all need to keep an eye on this. I've got a video about it over at thomhartmann.com. You can check it out there.
And welcome back, picking up your calls here on Anything Goes Friday the 13th. Kathy in Little Rock, Arkansas. Hey, Kathy, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Thank you for taking my call, and thank you for your excellent research and intelligent voice of the voiceless, and a shout-out to your Facebook group. This week in Arkansas, State Democratic representative took his mother to vote in the primaries, and she was denied the right to vote, or at least it was suppressed for a little while. There was an issue with her address, an old registration, but then her mother's neighbor, who they had been talking to earlier, came up, spoke past them to a poll worker, challenging her mother's vote, and her mother's neighbor is like an overzealous poll watcher representing some fringe right-wing congressional candidate. But anyway, she's elderly. She had hip surgery a couple of weeks ago. And, if a state representative's mother, and he's with her, is challenged, what's going to happen to the rest of us?
Yeah.
I just recently moved back to Little Rock. I changed my voter registration address. So will that be a problem? I'm going to find out real soon. And it's also not only just general voter suppression of Democrats, but female votes who've gotten married or changed their name for one reason or another, or just moved.
Wow. Yeah, the Republican Party says that they're trying to recruit 10,000 people to show up at polls all across the United States and do just what you just described, Kathy, challenge people who look like they might be Democratic voters and try to prevent them from voting. This is something that the Republican Party has been doing since 1960, when William Rehnquist helped organize what was called Operation Eagle Eye in Phoenix, where they would go to Hispanic and Native American communities and challenge voters to try to prevent them from voting. And that's how William Rehnquist became a big shot in the Republican Party, which led him all the way to becoming Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. So it's not at all surprising. It is horrifying. And expect this fall. All of you, anybody who's listening to my voice or is watching this program, this fall, the odds are very high when you show up to vote that there will be some right-wing crazy there who may have a gun in many states who will try to prevent you from voting. And it's all, in most of these states, it's perfectly legal. And just get ready.
I will, and I hope that poll worker that challenged her vote gets her vote challenged.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, karma would be appropriate. Kathy, thank you. Thanks for the heads up on this. Carrie in New Windsor, New York. Hey, Carrie, what's on your mind today?
Hey, I don't know quite if this is a conspiracy or not, but I've been trying to get through for over 2 hours, so I'm hoping that I can get more than a minute.
Sure. What's on your mind,
Thanks.
Carrie?
Just to make a few points. I'm calling because I have the websites that people can access in order to find the closest women's march to them.
Oh, great. What's the best website?
Yeah, so one is riseupforabortionrights.org, and that's the number 4. So riseupforabortionrights.org, and the other one is womensmarch.com. So,
that makes sense.
After hearing, say what?
I said that makes sense. I'm guessing NARAL and, what's the organization, the women's organization that Gloria Steinem started way back in the day? Now? National Organization of Women?
Yeah, I'm not interested in, who the organizers are.
No,
really,
I'm guessing that their websites also point into where you can find. I mean, I was just a guess on my part, but I'd be surprised if they did.
Yeah, I think 2 is enough. So, anyway, I think that after hearing this man call earlier today and after this woman call and be cut off with music at something 12:15 or 1:15 or something, when she was trying to just say how she's been repressed by men, it's so and then this guy is like, everybody go out and collect information tomorrow at the Women's March from women and give it to the Democratic Party. Dude, you're uninvited. I'm uninviting you personally. And all of the women that are marching, we're already voting, period. I think I can safely speak for every single woman who's going to go out there and march. That we've already done the other 5 minutes a year voting bull crap. that like is like, you know, if they're controlling our freaking votes anyway, like whatever. It's just totally not enough anymore just to vote. And so I'm inviting everyone to the Million Man March, which I'm hoping will happen. All you MGTOW groups, which stands for MGTOW, Men Go Their Own Way. Because when you said that it's like a finances kind of thing, what about child support? So, like, it's really a man's issue. I know last week you had a thing about controlling women, a book that you were reviewing or whatever called Controlling Women. It's about controlling men. I really don't think that it's about, having more white babies up for adoption, because if you outlaw abortion, there's going to be just as many people of color babies out there. So I think you can throw that one out the window of like.
Well, the way they did it up until the 1970s was they did not enforce the anti-abortion laws in black communities in the South, generally speaking. Abortion was, it was illegal and it was dangerous, but typically those were not the people who were being prosecuted. It was white women. That was the point of that article or that book. I forget which it was.
Okay, I'm just saying that with all these, like, once abortion is outlawed, with all these more, with the population increase of all these more unwanted babies, there's going to be all these unwanted fatherhoods, forced births equals forced fatherhoods, which equals male enslavement. And that's just like, you think if you're, that must only apply to people of color, the word slave. Well, how about all you teenage lacrosse-playing white male sons of MGTOWs? You're all going to have to pay child support or go to jail in 3 years. When you're 15 years old, in 3 years, you're going to go to jail for not paying child support once you become 18. So,
Okay.
It's a man's issue.
I get it.
Thank you.
Carrie, thank you. Deborah in Denver, Colorado. Hey, Deborah, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I just wanted to tell you that the student debt loan, I just want to give a different take on that. The story of the kinsman redeemer who would be a relative of somebody that was in economic bondage. He'd go and pay his debts and set him free. It's an honorable thing. It's not something negative.
Mm-hmm.
And, after 7 years, there was a law that it's called a Jubilee.
Mm-hmm.
After 7 years, all debts would be set free. So I don't want Biden to think that this is some kind of dishonorable thing. It's actually honorable. I mean, that's the fundamental belief system in Christianity, is that Jesus came to set the captives free as a kinsman redeemer. And anybody that knows their Bible should know that. So I just want to say that, my husband had a $150,000 loan a long time ago. The principal is not going down. We're not rich. We're in a one-bedroom apartment. Just barely, my car barely runs. And he has an ace in his pocket. He should use it because it's an honorable thing. It's not dishonorable. It's very honorable.
He being Biden.
And there's a lot of Christians that are in the same boat. A lot of Christians that are stuck like we are, and they can't get free from it. My husband has a really good business idea, and I do as well. We can't launch them. So
because of the student debt.
I just hope he uses these aces in his pocket, because he really could set a lot of people who are in economic bondage free from this unbelievable, unbearable debt.
I'm completely with you, Deborah. This debt never should have happened. We're the only developed country in the world where people go into debt to go to college. It is a scam. It's a hustle. The banks even got a law passed that you can't pay off some of these loans. You can't pay. I mean, you can't get you can't borrow against your mortgage to pay off student debt. I mean, it's insane the way this thing is put together, and it's so wrong, and it needs to be fixed. And President Biden has an opportunity to take a bite out of it. He should take a big bite. He should take the $50,000 bite. I'm guessing he's going to take a $10,000 or $20,000 bite. And then we should pass legislation to end this. I mean, we should go, in Canada, you can go to college, without breaking the bank for pretty much free. In most of Europe, you can go to college. In many countries, in Germany and Denmark, you get paid to go to college. It's just insane that that your husband is $150,000 in debt, and I've got kids who have college debt. I mean, the whole thing is
it kind of leaves me speechless. I mean, it is wrong. It is wrong for our country.
And I think that they should call out right-wing fundamentalists that use that argument is that everybody wants it for free. No, they should call them out on their belief system and say you got tax cuts and you think that's okay, but yet.
If I may, the Bush tax cut was more money than ending all student debt in America. Deborah, thank you for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
I mean, if the Republicans can give their rich donors more money than all the student debt in America, Democrats should be able to end all the student debt in America. And welcome back. Larry in Los Angeles. Hey, Larry, what's on your mind today?
Hi. I heard you say that you're kind of in favor of the progressives taking over the Democratic Party. I would contend that the weakest party in America is the Republican Party, and they have been taken over by the Putinists. They've been taken over by racists, anti-abortionists, the Trump humpers, QAnon, the Tea Party, the Dixiecrats, anti-communists, the fascists, I might have said that already, the KKK, and the anti-industrial complex people. The Republican Party has been taken over so many times in my lifetime that I can't even count it. They are an easy mark. You guys can take them.
Yeah, it's because they don't stand for anything.
Right, because they don't stand for anything. And I know that most of the progressives that I hear on this radio program, I know that if they can get one of those right-wingers, one of those Trump humpers in a debate, they will crush them.
Yeah.
All you have to do is just start going after them. And right now what they're trying to do is they're trying to do a very fascist thing. They're trying to get rid of all debate. They don't want to debate, particularly Democratic members, because they know they lose every debate every time they do this. So what they're doing, but they're still debating each other in the party. So if the progressives were to go after the Republicans in the party, it would be carnage, which is a good carnage in this case, beyond imagination.
Amen. Well said, Larry. Thank you very much. Len in Silva, North Carolina. Hey, Len, what's on your mind today?
Hey there. A couple of real quick things. First of all, do you know who the most famous Ukrainian was?
I don't.
Khrushchev.
Huh. Interesting.
And he was also very proud of it. But really, what I want to talk to you about was something that I was totally appalled by last Saturday on the Al Sharpton show, when he promoted the first big lie. And his statement was that states' rights was the reason for the Civil War.
States' rights was the excuse that was used to justify maintaining slavery.
That was the excuse used by Jefferson Davis in his history of the Confederacy. If you look at the documents of secession, the first thing in the documents of secession is slavery.
Right. I know. I would be surprised if Al Sharpton didn't know that. I mean, I'm guessing he misspoke, or whoever wrote the script for him, if he was reading off a prompter, was just. But let's cut him some slack here, Len. That's a fairly, it's a fairly small error, don't you think?
No, I don't. I think that's the first big lie.
I see states' rights and slavery, or apartheid, post-Civil War, as being kind of synonymous. Maybe.
Oh, come on, Tom. It was not states' rights until it came out after in Jefferson Davis's description it was always slavery.
Okay.
I happen to be married to an African American, and the idea that Al Sharpton said that was unbelievably appalling.
Okay, Len, I'm not disputing you. Thanks a lot for the call.
Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. The American Lung Association just came out with an amazing new study where they took Joe Biden's goal of a zero-emission power grid by 2035 and zero-emission passenger vehicles across the United States by 2035, which is a ways down the road, and trucks and buses being zero emission by 2040, and said, okay, what'll happen if we do this? They discovered that over 100,000 lives would be saved, people who wouldn't be getting cancer and COPD and asthma and all these kind of things. Over $1.2 trillion in public health costs would be avoided, and just massive, and 2.8 million fewer asthma attacks, among other public health problems. They note how extraordinary this would be, what a huge and positive impact it would have on America's public health, and how it's completely doable, the American Lung Association. The one note they say is that, quote, opposition from Republicans and 2 key Democratic senators makes it easier said than done. You can check it out at thomhartmann.com. And welcome back, Charles in Miami. Hey, Charles, what's on your mind today?
Hey, how you doing, Tom? Love your show. Been listening to you all week.
Thank you.
Every time I hear Vladimir Putin threatening any other country right now while he's at war, I just think of Adolf Hitler. I think of when Hitler opened up a second front in Russia, and that was the end of him. And I'm thinking if he does something like that, his generals would then definitely turn on him. But I'm calling because early on in the week he was speaking to someone, and you was explaining what Alito is trying to do is that they're challenging, in a way, the federal government, saying that states before the Civil War had certain rights that they could make these laws and not be so, under the thumb of the federal government. But my argument is this: anyone who tries that today, we had a Civil War, and the South, the Confederacy, they lost, so they forfeited that right. And that's why, everything I think comes under the federal government. And this theocracy, this whatever these Republicans are trying to create right now, with this theocracy in government, it only leads to corruption. It only leads to making people think that, or they're trying to fool people and thinking that, like the Catholic Church did way in the past with Martin Luther, that they have the right of God, and they can steal, and they can they could do things with impunity and not be questioned.
Yeah.
Like even right now with this, I don't understand with Biden and Democrats. We need to get federal troops in every polling station, especially the ones that we know the racists are, and we need to protect people on their right to vote. We need to make sure that we have lawyers, even if it's from the federal government itself. They're the very same day that they count these ballots and after these these elections are called, because I don't trust these Republicans. Not as far as I can throw them.
Yep.
Okay, and as far as
look what they just did in Pennsylvania, where they 1 out of 4, or was it 1 out of 6 voters in this county had their address changed to a post office box that's owned by the Republican Party for absentee ballots. I mean, that's insane.
Yeah, this is their trick. Now, what I'm trying to say is this: we need to win this election. Every bit counts, and we don't need corporate Democrats. It's time now that every every progressive Democrat get in a race and challenge these corporates. I guess you could call them Republican Democrats, and get them out of there, because we're not going to get anything done. We're always going to be spinning our wheels, and American people see that, and they sometimes look to the Republicans because with their power, they're ruthless. They get what they want.
Yeah, I'm with you, Charles. I said there was a Democratic candidate who, a conservative Dem, a corporate Democrat who was being challenged. And forgive me for not remembering the state. I just read this story yesterday, and I think it was the Financial Times. And what really pinged my brain about this was, happily, was that they had interviewed a voter
who said, he's another Joe Manchin, and we don't need any more Joe Manchins. And I think that Joe Manchin has now become the poster child for self-dealing corporate Democrats, and the party is rapidly purging itself of them. Charles, thank you for the call. Jeff in Portland. Hey, Jeff, what's on your mind today?
Hey, happy Friday, Tom, and shout out to Joyce. That was a really cool interview you did with her. And, you know, it's not why I called. Yeah, unbelievable. And it's not why I called, Tom, but the rant you played yesterday of Hakeem Jeffries asking Clarence Thomas why he's such a hater, and to Charles's point just now, you know, what Hakeem Jeffries was saying really applies to the whole Republican Party.
Yep.
And it echoed the 1996 George Carlin clip that went viral last week. I'm sure you've heard it, but you know, George said conservatives hate women. They're not pro-life. They're anti-woman, and you know, it's a great clip for people that I encourage.
It really,
people
truly
to see
is,
it.
yeah.
And to the point, you know, let's vote for some strong progressive women this month, like Jamie McLeod Skinner here in Oregon and Jessica Cisneros in Texas.
Yep.
But you know, regarding Rand Paul, Tom, in my opinion, his stance might have some legitimacy if he was asking the Pentagon to pay for all of it or some of it, you know, as some of your callers were suggesting yesterday.
Yeah.
But you know, we really need to.
He's not.
Well, we really
I'm sorry,
no,
Jeff.
He's not. Or if he was.
I'm sorry, I have to end you there because it's the end of the show. Hey, special thanks to Louise Hartman, Sean Taylor, Nate Atwell, Jamie Holly, Joyce the Hammer Nance, who was on our show today, Sue Nethercutt, Patrick Hoyt, Geraldine Halbert, Ron Hartenbaum, Chase Spross, Nicholas Miller, Pat Sweeney, Jay LeBlanc, Al Gorilla Rhythm, Connor Arroyo, and Carna Verde. And the last 4 or 5 being the great people who help monitor our chat room over on YouTube, too. Thank you so much to all of you. Thank you to you. Get out there, get active. And this weekend, get out on the streets. Tag You're It. We'll see you on Monday. Have a great weekend.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, how the death of privacy and the rise of surveillance threaten us and our democracy, by Thom Hartmann. More information at all book outlets. Wild Alaskan Company, 100% sustainable wild-caught seafood delivered right to your door. More info at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. Cozy Earth, better sleep, better you. More info at cozyearth.com, promo code TOM. The latest views and opinions from U.S. politics and other fascinating subjects, too, including cutting-edge science reports at HartmannReport.com. And Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at Dinovite.com.
We say fight back!